Proud.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to call to order the 5 p.m. City Council workshop. It is January 24. And just for the record, all 5 councilors are here. And we'll just get into it. Lieutenant Davis, you're first up with the DCSO update.
Good evening, everybody.
How's it going?
Going great.
Yeah.
Weather's getting better.
Thank God.
A little less crazy.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so next week on the 31st, Aaron Myers will be joining our crew as the 3rd City Assisters deputy. So obviously we've been down since late August, down to 2 deputies. And so now we will be getting him starting. We'll be filling that swing shift from Wednesday through Saturday, 2 to midnight. So we're really grateful to get him added to our crew. He's going to be great. We'll bring him here one night to meet everyone. Maybe in March or something, we can get something, February or March, we can get something set up. I know he's excited to be here.
Does that get us fully staffed as
Yep.
far as the positions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And I've been talking with Carrie a little bit. We'll be presenting some end of the year statistics next month sometime at our other workshop. So we'll be able to compare really 2021, 22, 23. We'll have some good comparison numbers of all the statistics and stuff that we can look at. And we're still working on some special requests on some specific crime data that Joe Jensen, our record specialist, is working on. And so hopefully we'll have a little bit more for you at that time as well. Address some of those like part 1 and part 2 crimes that we got questions about. And then just last week or so, we've been pretty busy dealing with weather related calls. Obviously we had the tree go down. We were just talking about it over on Ash. And so we were working through those and then some crashes, but for the most part, we all weathered the storm pretty well. So didn't have too many issues. Not a lot of injuries, at least in our area. Obviously South County and South Lopine had some pretty horrendous crashes and stuff, but we made it out pretty good. So that's all I have.
All right. Anybody have any questions, comments?
Is our community set up adequately to deal with this kind of weather and in a safe manner? Do you feel, do you have any suggestions for anything we should be doing that would be helpful, or are we doing about the best that can be expected?
Well, I was just talking with Paul about just the size of the trees that we have, and even at my own property, it was a little unsettling with the wind and how hard it was blowing and how big of trees we have. And so I think that is a consideration. It's just something that we're going to have to deal with a lot of old ponderosa pines here in town, and proximity obviously to power lines and structures and people. And we got lucky the other night. I don't know what the solution to that is we all love our trees.
Underground
Utilities, that's on us more than anything.
It's on just, enough money, we could do with a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like anything, summertime, we obviously have wildfire things that can cause issues that we have to deal with. And then these winter weather related issues can also tax our resources. The public works was great, especially the night that we did have the tree go down. Paul's crew was there and did a great job setting up and
but Paul wasn't.
Just saying they were tremendous.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see Paul.
I didn't see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
That's all I
Ponderosa pines, because we're getting a little more humid in our high desert here. I know arborists can advise, like if the ponderosa pine doesn't have a lot of wide root. It's mostly very short. And they could probably advise us as to any trees that might be at risk and how to mitigate that.
I would defer to
if
Paul and other.
Yeah.
Our forestry board, I'm sure would, they're probably.
That would be a
ones that-
discussion, for the urban forestry board. And
Yeah.
then it's something that we do talk about. I think that that's a big discussion for another day, to be honest with you. That is
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
it is.
It's not an easy solution.
Yeah, I did talk to that particular homeowner whose property was damaged from actually a tree on an adjoining property, and it was a split fork tree that snapped off about 30 or 40 feet off the ground. And those trees that fork sometimes can be weak at that split, and I'm fairly sure that he has an arborist looking at other trees in his little area there that also have those split forks. And I don't, the other tree that came down was a cottonwood across the street. Luckily, that didn't hit anything. It just leaned into the,
Well, and I
I
can.
don't think that one hit anything, but
You don't have, you don't go very far in the state. You drive over the mountain and Thurston area was basically destroyed trees down everywhere. I mean,
oh,
it's gonna happen whether you have big trees or little trees. And we've even had, when I was in the park, we had these big cottonwoods and they would calve sometimes in July, just decide they're gonna drop 1.5 tons of branches down on somebody. We had 4th of July set up and an hour before the event, we had a big one come down and land on all the chairs. Luckily, no one's there. So I mean, it's not an easy solution. And I think going to science and seeing what it says is a good idea, but I really think that's a discussion for the Urban Forestry Board and a much bigger topic than we're here prepared to deal with tonight, I think.
oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there any other questions or comments for Lieutenant Davis?
It's good to hear that we didn't have major
Yeah.
fender benders. It's my understanding, again, I've been here not long, but you know, freezing rain and the ice event is uncommon. So I think it's kudos to the public for staying safe and being careful in that weather. But it is something that talk about resiliency and emergency management, something we keep in mind. Right? Our climate is changing, and freezing rain is a different animal in terms of how we respond and clean up, and also damages the trees and inlets and things like that. So, sorry, Harry. That's okay. I wasn't saying anything that important, except for snow and ice is different. And, thanks for keeping our community safe. And again, opportunity to say thanks to Public Works too for their response,
Absolutely.
keeping the roads clear and everything.
All right. Thank you, Lieutenant Davis. One down, 2 to go. Next up is Water and Sewer SDC update. Public Works Director Agna and Steve Donovan's on the line, I believe. How's it going?
Good. If Steve can.
Yeah, so Steve Donovan is our consultant that has been working with us on updating our system development charges. As you recall, I want to say 8 or 9 months ago, the council adopted both the water master plan and the wastewater master plan after that update or that project to update those master plans. A big part of that work was to update our capital improvement plans for our wastewater and water systems. And how do you pay for those systems? How do you pay for those improvements? Well, rates, right? Through we need rates to be able to debt finance, bond, big expensive projects, but also anything that's growth related is supported by system development charges, right? Which are paid for by developers when they construct projects and pull permits. So we've been working with Steve Donovan. We contracted with him, I think, a few months ago to perform this update. And so this is the first work session. We introduced the rate increases and for the system development charges, and he'll walk through that in his presentation. Any other introduction comments there, Paul?
No, I think just one thing to add, I guess, is it's important to always keep in mind that these SDCs are meant to pay for growth. And a lot of these projects are 100% growth, but some of them, there's a split. And whether we're replacing an old 12-inch pipe with a new 16-inch pipe, that 12-inch pipe replacement needs to be paid with water rate funds. The difference between the 12-inch and the 16-inch pipe can be paid with SDCs because it's providing additional capacity. So something to think about. We have several of those projects on our list, and we have our engineers do the math to figure out what the proportional split is with that. So that's all I had. I think we'll kick it over to Steve.
Steve, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Can I share my screen? Is that appropriate from my end?
You should be able to.
Okay, great. Can you all see this on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. What I'm going to do is we're going to walk through the show today, and there's going to be some comments in between. So we'll have Paul and perhaps Jordan add in comments. This will be pretty casual, and what I'll do is I'll start out with laying out exactly what we're talking about tonight. A history and background of the water and sewer SDCs. We're fortunate that we've got some institutional memory here. Paul and I, we did the last update of the water and sewer SDCs back in 2018, and we'll share that with you in a minute. Talk about policy issues and make sure the council is all aware of the policy latitude that you have relative to SDCs. And we're going to show you the numbers, and then we're going to show you what our peer communities are charging for the same water and sewer SDCs. So in terms of history, your current water and sewer SDC methodologies were reviewed and adopted by the council in May of 18 and adopted by resolution, and you'll continue to do that going forward. That's a policy of the council. The SDC methodology that we're proposing today mirrors what we did in 2018 and is what you've adopted in the past. The new water and sewer master plans have included in them capital improvement plans, and they were adopted by ordinance. And this is an extremely important point because we can't even think about changing a system development charge without having an adopted capital improvement plan, either by resolution or ordinance. That's the statute. And then the council, your policy has always been, going back many, many years now, that when master plans are completed, staff is directed to follow up with an SDC review to keep your rates and charges current relative to your new master plans. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the policy. And I think you all know this, but to share with people who are online and may not know, SDCs are not charged to ratepayers. They're only charged to development and charged based on their proportionate share of demand for growth. And SDCs are one-time fees charged on new development at the time of permit issuance. And the SDCs consist of two unique components, a reimbursement fee and an improvement fee. A reimbursement fee is a fee that you charge for built capacity. So water systems that are already in the ground and have capacity remaining to serve, you charge new development for that capacity remaining, in addition to an improvement fee, which is for planned future development, i.e. the projects that are in your new master plans. The bean counting side of this is SDCs are what is by Oregon budget law considered restricted revenues and can only be spent on capacity expanding projects or a portion of projects that expand capacity. Paul pointed that out in his opening comments, the difference between the 12-inch line and the 16-inch line. It's a really good kickoff to explain what that restriction means. And SDCs absolutely do have an impact on how infrastructure is developed and how development occurs, and even your tax base. You are a growing community, so SDCs are an important element of your funding strategy for infrastructure. And in terms of the SDC itself, the statute lays out very specifically how we calculate the maximum amount allowable to be charged. It does not require you as the governing body to charge the maximum. And in fact, there are many communities across the state that do not charge their maximum. Some don't even charge any SDCs at all. For instance, Coos Bay on sewer or Reedsport on the coast. They're communities that haven't experienced growth in a while, and they haven't put SDCs in as a matter of policy to attract growth. That's not your problem. Growth is at your door. So the next slide is, pardon me, what's the numbers? And here are the numbers. And these are in your packets. You currently charge a total of $9,117 for a single family home, consisting of $39.51 for water and $5,166 for sewer. Based on our analysis, we're recommending that you charge $5,472 for wastewater, a very modest increase. And a matter of fact, I was kind of beating Paul up when we first looked at this. I said, how can that be? And he said, we've got a fairly new system that doesn't require a whole lot of investment right now. You will in the future, but right now you're very fortunate on the wastewater side. Water is different. We're recommending a effective doubling of the water SDC from 3951 to 7392. And you have a number of large, expensive projects that have a large fraction or complete amount attributable to growth. So the next slide is the comps for water. And as you can see in this slide, we're recommending that you raise it to 7392. You, at this point, if you choose to follow this direction or this recommendation, would be high among your peers. And that is a complete calculation that we have made. On the sewer side, even with the modest increase, you would kind of be in the middle of the pack relative to your peers. And then finally, here is them all bundled together because you charge SDCs for not just water and sewer, but you charge for streets and for parks. You don't charge storm drainage, whereas Madras does. But even with this rate, this recommended increase, you would go your total suite of SDCs for a single family would go from $12,919 to $16,667. You would be right in the middle of the pack. And now this chart is subject to change, but this is what's in your packets. Today, we want to get guidance from you, and you're going to be taking input from other sources here on this issue. We'd like to get guidance from you today. We have spoken to COBA, and COBA has asked us to delay this process by 90 days. And based on conversations with city staff has no problem with that. So this chart or this calendar would actually slide from incorporation on April to July. We would move it back. And this is at the request of COBA. Our initial thinking was we were going to have a resolution in front of you for public hearing on February 14th. And then we would have raised those rates July 1st anyway. So there's really no at risk here, I lack for a better term. So that's our strategy going forward. And if I can, I'd like to stop sharing my screen now and hand it back to Paul.
Yeah, I was going to add on the timeline and kind of just paint a little bit more of a picture for council. We have the master plans adopted. We start to work on the SDC increases. At the same time, we're looking at our customer rates and where those need to be in terms of rate revenue to support these projects. During goal setting, we'll talk about the next steps on what staff needs to do in terms of the milestones on some of these projects. We've adopted a capital improvement plan that kind of outlines the next 4 to 5 years, but what are the high priority projects that we need to get into the budget? How are we going to tackle those? I think we already have some progress on like the West Side Pump Station, for example, but we have the Edgerton Road project coming up. We need to start work on the reservoir. So there's some high priority projects that are in the queue. And so this is one of those vital pieces of how do we fund those projects and build those into our budget. Keep in mind, this is, revenue that we generate through growth, right? So this is revenue that we're collecting over time. So a lot of those projects will be funded through loans, grants. We have meetings with Business Oregon coming up to figure out what is the full funding package to support these projects. My main point here in this timeline is that this will be, it's proposed to be effective July 1. So we have time to communicate. We have time to continue to work on things like the rate increases and what those will look like, share that information with the public, and kind of work all in concert towards adopting a budget and adopting a master fee schedule that will reflect an increase in SDCs and rates. And the other component to this that isn't reflected in those comparison charts that Steve shared is that we also have a new parks master plan that was just adopted. And we are looking at a methodology change and adjusting the charges for parks SDCs. And part of that conversation would be a level of service conversation with the council on what we want to set that as per the recommendations from the Parks Master Plan. But it does sound like a lot. It has kind of been in the work plan. It's all kind of coming at once. And for on the utility side, there's a reason for that. And that's kind of to feed into the budget process for that July 1st timeline. And also the fact that we have a lot of capital projects to start working on this next fiscal year.
Okay, you got any more, Paul? You can add to that?
You know, these high priority projects, you remember from the master plan, were scheduled for that 2023 to 2027 time period. And here we are at 2024. So we're ready to start going to design, start procuring some design build consultants for the larger projects and get these things ready to go to construction in, you know, the next 1 to 2 to 3 years.
Right, and so as far as paying for a lot of these capital improvement projects, there's much like affordable housing, there's a lot of layering, right? I mean, we don't put up all the money, obviously, and STCs by themselves don't pay for everything. We're always looking for partners and working with Business Oregon to try and get some help from the state or the feds or whoever, right?
And with our medium income, we're not gonna score real high on the grant ask. Potentially there's some job, you know, forgiveness potential there, but we're gonna be looking at loans through, you know, either the Safe Water Drinking Program or, you know, rural development, large funders that fund, you know, water and wastewater projects. But so what we're looking at is a revenue stream to be able to pay that debt, right? And that debt's going to occur over the next 20 or 30 years. And the way you set up your SCCs is you don't want to just pay all cash up front. For one thing, you don't have it, but also users coming in 20 years from now need to pay in for those projects.
Right.
When you debt fund it, you allow that to happen.
Right. And obviously this is what might be called good debt. I mean, this is debt that's improving the community and, you know, making it a safer environment and to live and.
Yeah, we have very little debt, very little. And, you know, when you have $20 million worth of water and wastewater projects, you're gonna have to issue debt, both to be funded by SCCs and rates. Actually, the percentage of the projects that are gonna have to be paid with rates that are not STC eligible is a little bit more than half. So.
And Paul, some of this, we talk about SDCs and we're talking about growth. We're talking about planned future growth and those sorts of things. That's why they're charged at the time of the permit issuance unless there's some kind of a deferral. So what we're really talking about too is building capacity for some of the discussions we're going to have related to a URA, possible URA expansion and things like that. Not URA, UGB, too many U's in my life right now, UGB expansion and stuff like that. And so part of this is ensuring that we have the infrastructure in place if we have to grow larger as a community to be able to support that rather than trying to rush and build something right at the time that we're trying to do the rest of it. Is that an accurate thought?
Absolutely. So you remember in the master plans, we chose that 2042 planning period with a population of 7,000 people. And these projects need to be in place to be able to support those.
Yeah, that was my,
Absolutely.
All right.
I had a couple questions. Oh, do you want to go ahead?
Go ahead. The 2 questions. Why would we want to postpone this from April to
that was my
July?
question. 90 days.
Historically, we've done that in the past with both rates and STCs, and it just gives the building community a heads up where they can put that in their pro forma for future projects, also strategize when they want to get their permits in ahead of time. We are in a time period of kind of growth slowing down. So it's not as critical. It's not like we're going to miss out on a lot of, projects and building permits coming in.
So even if we were to move, it wasn't going to be effective until July anyway, was it not?
That's what our recommendation was going to
Yeah.
be.
So I think Koba mentioned the days because I think they were arguing that there was a methodology change, whereas, we're following state statute that really we have
So we-
adopted a new master plan,
we
a new
can
capital plan.
Review the issues that
Yeah,
they
so
might have and
Yeah, but I think the 90
clarify.
days is, like Paul said, this won't be implemented until July 1. We have time. The council wouldn't have to adopt the resolution until later in the spring.
So, while one might or might not agree with the 90-day in the COBA letter,
Mhm.
what we're really saying is that it's good community relations. It doesn't hurt us to do it. So let's not have that be an addressable concern that might come up.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really change the timeline or the plan. And in the interim, it gives us a chance to examine these numbers more closely and decide what it is you want to put forward to us in the resolution. Is that a fair assessment? Yeah.
I mean, in the past, we've had, if I remember right, we had certain developers come in and just have conversations about particular projects or, future subdivisions and things like that. And it's just a little more time for them to get used to the idea and try and plug some numbers into it before we actually pass the resolution. Whether or not the price actually changed until July 1, that's really not the consideration. It's more about the outreach and communication, I think.
My second question was for Jordan. You hinted at, we've just updated the Parks Master Plan.
Mhm.
So the overall rate for Sisters compared to other communities could change.
Yeah.
Because this is just including 2 items as opposed to streets and parks.
Yeah, and I think transportation SDCs were modified. Correct me if I'm wrong, or do we have that coming up too? So it's probably premature to mention where we're at with parks. We had a meeting on Friday to review the information from Steve, who's working on it, but it is proposed to increase based on the recommended level of service that we currently have and where we aspire to be. I can probably say it's not a increase that looks like water would be, but it is an increase. And it would still keep us probably in the middle of the pack there, below Bend, Redmond, Prineville, in terms of total cost for development permit.
Okay.
Typically, it's a game of leapfrog when you look at our
Yeah.
neighboring cities. Whoever's updated the most recently,
Mhm.
they're the most expensive, and getting back to, the biggest driver of that water SDC going up with these big projects and the cost increases that we saw this go around really revolves around just the inflationary world that we were in and that we're still in. It just costs a lot more to put in pipe. Steel costs more. Labor costs more. So what the building sector has seen in the last 3 or 4 years, we're seeing the exact same thing, which is what's driving these costs up.
So the costs are going to be there. We're just deciding who's going to pay for them.
Equitably, yes.
Yes, I mean,
Yes.
it's what the distribution is and
But
We could choose, I mean, like Steve said, we could choose to not raise it that much, but why, that doesn't seem like a great idea because we do want certainty in our water.
and growth to pay for
And
itself.
growth to
Yeah,
pay
I mean,
for.
that's the principle, but I think it's hard to have this conversation and not mention that we do have concerns about affordability, right? And
Sure.
what is that linkage between the cost to construct in a community and the cost of housing? And I think, just an hour ago, the council had a conversation, or the board had a conversation about, workforce housing and establishing that program and our affordable housing program. So the things that we're doing on the other side to try to reduce those costs to get, workforce housing and affordable housing in our community, recognizing that we also have costs that we have to construct utilities to support that kind of housing and
Sure.
too, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. One of them was why the water increased, but you answered that. Thank you. The, what is the total? So I mean, this is, there are four SDCs, but just say somebody obviously has to still pay for building permits and, a few other fees. I mean, do we have a sense of all of those together, what that is and, compared to other communities? I mean, I've heard, a couple people and developers say, oh, it's expensive to build in Sisters because of stuff on the government end. And I'm just curious, um, if that's really true or not, I mean, looking at this chart, we're, even with the proposed, we're squarely in the middle and significantly cheaper than other communities, but I know there's other costs, permits and stuff associated, so.
Yeah, I mean, not off the top. I mean, I think we can probably put that together as we talk about master fees, because, one thing that we do look at and should be looking at on an annual basis is not just system development charges, right? You're right. There's more costs. There's the building permit, which, Deschutes County does on our, for us, but land use too is a part of that process. And, when you compare us to other communities, I think we're pretty low on the land use side. I've never been in a community that didn't hear from builders saying it's expensive to build. So
Right.
that's everywhere you go. But we can probably put together a full fee schedule to show you, and we could probably just pull one up too for a recent, house permit and what did that cost all in as part of the master fee update.
And are these fees, per water meter?
Correct.
Okay, so if somebody was gonna build a cottage cluster, they're still having to pay the same fee for each one if there's separate meters? Just thinking of economies of scale and,
So you could build a duplex with 1 meter on one tax lot and pay the one STC. Or you could build a townhome, same as a duplex, on 2 separate lots that's required. Each lot has to have their own meter,
Right.
and they pay 2 STC. So it kind of gives some flexibility up to the developer to, do I want to set it up to sell in the future, half of it, or just use it for rental properties and keep them both and pay half the SCCs. So there is flexibility with the meter-based charge, but all the numbers you saw were for a standard 3/4 inch meter. If you want a 1 inch, 1.5 inch, 2 inch, obviously they increase according to water.
okay. And my last question is maybe for Steve, when calculating these, do you also take into account, as waiving SDCs for certain types of development is a relatively common tool that communities use, to partner with. Was that kind of factored in that over time there would probably be a certain amount of projects that might not be paying into SDCs, or do you kind of account for that?
No, we don't. And this is another policy question for you folks. And I think the mayor, you really pointed out well. If we choose to not collect revenues that we have established, that means we have to collect that revenue from somewhere else. And that means if you decide to waive SDCs for certain types of development, we have by definition are saying those costs will now be borne by ratepayers. So ratepayers will have to subsidize growth for perfectly good policy decisions on your part. But it is a decision that you're explicitly making that the costs don't go away. They simply get shifted. And in this case, the recovery would come from rates rather than SDCs.
Okay, thank you.
I think the council's kind of debated that policy, right, in terms of some of the programs, assistance programs we had with affordable housing, for example, right? Grants to kind of backfill to make sure our utilities are made whole. You know, we've talked about deferrals, right, and deferring paying the permit until you get certificate of occupancy, right, to kind of help them pencil out that. But, it's worth thinking about and kind of talking about, I think, as a council is, you're subsidizing the affordable housing, but I think cities have recently taken other approaches like through grant programs, maybe other incentives,
Mhm.
right? Instead of impacting your utilities and your infrastructure in that way, you come up with other creative ways to sort of offset the cost for development and the type of development that the council wants to see.
And one other question, thank you. Am I correct in the, in the beginning, Steve, that you mentioned that, is this kind of our one shot to do this for a while? Usually kind of comes on the heels of.
Oh, no, no. If I said that, I was wrong. You have, at the pleasure of the council, can revisit SDCs anytime you want.
Okay,
But it's a lot of work. I mean, it's not like you just come up, it's not like 5 minutes. You can just, I mean, I suppose it could be, you could make it easy and just say, we're going to go up X% per year or something like that, but
I've seen that done.
You know,
It
the
would be
advantage,
I don't think it's equitable though.
Yeah, it would be
I don't either.
challenged.
And that'll be part of our recommendation to the council is to do inflationary adjustments every year.
Right.
Which we have done in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Otherwise, those numbers would look worse. So trying to keep up that way helps.
Yeah.
You know, it occurs to me that it's a very good idea to do this SDC proposal as proposed. Because at some point, water rates are going to have to go up per the lack of water. And I'm talking a few years out, but putting ourselves in a position where we're raising rates to cover for not doing SDCs doesn't seem like a wise position to be in, given that water can be an issue in the future.
Yeah. And honestly, part of our growth strategy and, having another reservoir is to make sure we're meeting demand or exceeding demand, which we normally do. Obviously, we stay way ahead of it. And I would say, we're staying 10, 20 years ahead of it now. And hopefully the people after us are staying 10, 20 years ahead of it down the road. Let's hope we never get water scarcity. I mean, that's just a nightmare that
well,
we
the
don't.
reservoir also is for wildfire resiliency too. to have
It's,
that.
yeah, I mean, it's not the only reason, obviously, but certainly what Councilor Cobb was talking about as far as capacity.
And I think that when I appreciated, which I already knew occurred, but I appreciated you stating it clearly that some of these projects, upsizing piping, that we can only pay for a portion of that with SDCs. Because in reality, the smaller diameter pipe is at the cost, the amount of volume that the smaller diameter pipe would carry in the bigger pipe has to be paid for out of rate funds and those sorts of things. So, when you see someone say, well, you're doing this line and this line really isn't what we should be paying for. The reality is, well, you're paying for part of it. We're paying for the rest.
Right.
So.
Anybody have anything else? I haven't really said much. Well, I have, but I want to make one comment. We throw around the word developer a lot, and I do want to make sure that people understand that in most areas of development, the developer is either the homeowner or it's a charge that gets passed on to the future homeowner. And it makes it easy just using the word developer, but at the same time, you're really talking about our future homeowners and citizens that will be owning the home. Not all of that cost goes, but I would say most of it gets passed on for sure. And probably rightly so. They're the ones that are going to be using the system down the road. But I just wanted to make sure that that's really clear. We use the word developer like it's this kind of cloudy
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike.
thing. So I just wanted to make sure we all knew what we were talking about. There was one more thing that Steve said, and he talked about, charging the maximum. And I guess my question is, are we charging the maximum? I mean, obviously we have the right to charge whatever we want, but when he used that phrase, charging the maximum, it kind of just, I mean, what do you think about that? And
councils can choose not to charge to the maximum.
right,
So no, we're limited and based on the calculations of what's eligible through growth, and there's a whole spreadsheet that calculates that.
sure,
But, in terms of implementing it, you could decide, oh, this is a big jump all at one time. Let's do half now, half later, or whatever.
I gotcha. So based on the metrics, we're charging as,
Consistent
what-
with our existing,
What's
yeah,
proposed.
yeah.
that's
it's
correct.
consistent with the
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I'm not trying to gotcha or anything like that. I just want to make sure we all know what we're talking about. And
Yep,
Okay.
all of our calculations are based off of that 2023 cost estimate
Okay,
that our engineers came up with. And it's important to also recognize that we need to do these projects, some of them sooner than later, to especially as fire codes get more restrictive. We're seeing almost every year the requirement to have additional hydrants, reduce the spacing between hydrants, having higher flows out of your hydrants in order for the development to be able to even be able to develop.
Yeah.
And if that's not there, then they may have to chase lines back several blocks or participate in building another well and doing things that would completely, kill the development.
sure.
So doing this ahead of time and keeping the capacity there allows development to actually occur.
Yeah.
So it's
Easier.
in everybody's best
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah.
Well stated. All right, is there anything else? Any
I had a
further
couple
questions?
things in this COBA letter that we all got
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
that I wanted to touch on.
Good.
So the transmission line that we talked about, that we're replacing from 12-inch to 16-inch, we're only charging for that upsize in cost for SCCs. And then the Edgerton Road water line, it is going to be coming into the west side of town, but I think there's not a really good understanding from these people on how our system works, because that line's going to feed the entire town, no matter where it comes in. So
Right.
it's going to increase fire flows on the east side, the west side, south, and north. And then the last one is they had a good catch on the rehab of the existing reservoir. And we went back and our engineers had included that line in the 2.2 million gallon new reservoir. And we didn't catch that, so we're gonna back that out. So you'll actually see that number go down by like $163.
Hmm.
So that was a good catch on their part.
Oh, there you go. All right,
Any other questions on that communication from COBA?
Appreciate you clarifying.
Sure.
all right. Anything else? Great presentation. Thank you, Steve,
You're welcome.
being here. Thanks for helping us out. I'll sign your check later. One of us will. I'm just kidding. He's a consultant, right? We have to pay him. He doesn't do it for free. All right, thank you.
Bringing it back. Thank you.
Yeah, but we're looking forward to it. Appreciate that. All right. Next item on the agenda, short-term rental code amendments. Mr. Martin? Before we get started, I'd like everybody to know I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation. I do have a conflict of interest. I am a short-term rental license holder. So I am going to leave my chair.
Ooh, that's gonna be.
Council President Blum will run the rest of this workshop, at least this portion of the
Why
workshop.
don't I go out and take a nap? I'd have applied for it.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
Don't you have to recuse yourself if we're going to vote on something?
I'm just gonna do it, just to stay out of the conversation, yeah, I could probably do it, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do it for now. And
I agree.
I was in the initial conversation about, when we had a city council meeting about directing staff which way to go, and I think that was fine. But you guys are gonna take this particular issue, from now on without my help.
I think that's a smart move.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Go ahead. It's all
Go
yours.
ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Go take your name tag. Go take your name tag with you too.
Yeah.
Here.
We get unruly.
Good evening. Thank you, Council President. Good evening, councilors and all of those in attendance tonight. Matthew Martin, City of Sisters Community Development Department. I'm joined by Scott Woodford, Community Development Department Director. We're back for a continued discussion regarding short-term rentals and the program we have here in Sisters and contemplated code amendments. So different from how it's characterized on the agenda. We're not quite ready for amendments yet, but we're rather presenting additional data that was requested by the council and the planning commission as we had our previous workshops with both bodies. A little bit of background, want to reiterate that why we're coming forward with this discussion is because the city council established it as a goal to evaluate the short-term rental program to mitigate adverse impacts on the community. And those impacts were characterized by the council as impacts on the availability of housing for long-term occupancy and potential nuisances created by short-term rentals. So last year in the fall, we met with both City Council and Planning Commission to provide an overview of the short-term rental program that we have in place now, what that regulatory framework is as to where, how, and what way short-term rentals can be established and operated, and what those impacts are, both in where they are, revenue impacts, social impacts, and then think about next steps. City Council offered a variety of considerations for potential code amendments. And we brought those first initial topics to the Planning Commission as well. And Planning Commission was in general agreement with those priorities, those being increasing the concentration limit that's currently in place, the limit of 250-foot buffer around short-term rentals, considering increasing that to some number such as 500 feet. Changing where the concentration limits are applied. Currently, commercial areas and condominiums are exempt from the concentration limit, considering whether or not those should be applied in those areas. I do want to pause on that one in particular. That's where Planning Commission was in a bit of, I don't know, disagreement, but had different opinions on, really want to scrutinize whether those should be applied in the commercial districts, in the converse being perhaps driving short-term rentals to those commercial areas where overnight accommodations and lodging may be already an allowed use and perhaps where we want that type of use. Also want to acknowledge that at the Planning Commission, we did have some public comment and testimony relative to that discussion, and they were also highlighting the concern with applying the concentration limit to the commercial areas for those same reasons. And then also an agreement on prohibiting short-term rentals in new urban growth boundary expansion or annexation areas. And then lastly, considering limiting transferability of those short-term rentals that are currently allowed to be transferred to future property owners. I will acknowledge that that transferability has become kind of a point of not contention, but needing a further legal evaluation. I think I acknowledged with you before that there was some concern about vested rights associated with those land uses, and therefore limiting the potential transfer of that vested right may be construed as a takings, and therefore have some liability for the city in establishing that type of limitation. So there's more research to be done in that realm. So we're not going to cover that necessarily today, but if it's certainly an interest of the council moving forward, we can drill down on that further with. At this point, I've looked into various jurisdictions, both here in Oregon and throughout the United States, in Montana, California, that have implemented changes to their program, but I haven't found one that had it short-term rentals regulated by the development code that have eliminated that opportunity for transfer. And so that under that kind of that notion that it's a vested right on the property. Not to say that we can't explore strategies in that realm, but we're not in a position to say yay or nay or give a staff's opinion on that aspect of any changes. I do want to note also that Planning Commission did elevate an additional consideration, that being considering increasing the minimum number of days that the short-term rental needs to be rented in the calendar year. Currently, it's 1 day within I said calendar year, within 365 days. rented one day within that 360-day time period. They thought it should be considered whether or not that should be elevated or increased to another number. What that number is that 7 days, 14 days, or X to be determined. So I wanted to offer that as Planning Commission's input on the project. But throughout those discussions, there was interest in more data to be presented, and that's what we're here to provide you today. In particular, I reached out to the Sheriff's Office to get real data associated with short-term rental properties as it relates to calls directed to those properties. Also reached out to short-term rental owners and operators to get their input on their experiences with the program and their consideration of potentially renting their properties long-term. And then we've also done initial analysis of increasing that concentration limit buffer from our 250 feet that we have in place now up to 500 feet and what that impact is on kind of cursory analysis. I think we'll dive right in. So we reached out to Deschutes County Sheriff's Office and provided a list of all short-term rental addresses. And they provided data as requested for the preceding 5-year time period. So we wanted to see when we implemented the most recent comprehensive changes to the short-term rental program in 2018, you know, what have we experienced since then? And since then, those short-term rental properties have received a total of 258 calls. Within that data, there was, as I've noted in the presentation, an asterisk where they specifically were able to identify and note that 65 unique calls to a particular property were directed and associated with a previous long-term tenant of the property. So it was clear to them that those calls were not in any way associated with the short-term rental use of the property. So that results in a net number of calls to 193 to those properties. I do need to note that these calls and the way that calls are reported, there's no distinction or differentiation between is that call related to a overnight guest or is that associated with the primary resident or the owner of the property, but rather it's just associated with the address. So there is some limitation of the data that we have here today. But in any regard, those 193 calls equate to just over 0.5% of the overall calls that the Sheriff's Office has received in the last 5-year time period.
Can I ask a question about that? So if we extrapolate that short-term rentals are around 10% of our total housing stock, they only have 0.6% of the calls. So the remainder of the calls are from long-term rentals or homeowners. Is that what I'm extrapolating here?
No, I wouldn't go that far. Couple of points of clarification is, I believe when we provided the overall number of housing units in town, I believe it was right around 2,000 dwelling units, which short-term rentals equated to about 5%. So I just wanted to bring that number down.
Oh, okay.
But the overall calls that we have noted here, the 30,000, that's not just to residential properties, that's all calls within the city.
So that could be a traffic stop. It could be an animal at large.
Right. Well, that's why I wanted
Be
to
a hot
clarify.
tub
I
party.
was making a,
It's calls on not actual traffic stops or.
right.
Correct, it's just.
They aren't, well, they weren't nuisance property calls to homes.
That's right. These are all calls to the Sheriff's Office that
Okay,
in
great.
any
Yeah, I think
category
that
or
could be
distinction.
easily misconstrued.
Okay, I appreciate the question and the opportunity to clarify. So all calls within the city limits. Now, then we're drilling down on the short-term rental properties. Within that 5-year time period, the table in the lower left acknowledges that or breaks out the total number of calls to individual properties. I think it's noteworthy that only 8 calls or 8 properties were responsible for in excess of 5 calls over that 5-year time period, and 49 received none. So I think, as Matt mentioned, there's nuance to that. Because as you see in the survey responses, there's a lot of folks here who have short-term rentals that are also owner occupied, right?
Right.
So some of those calls could be because owner activity or the owner makes a call for some reason, right? And it doesn't have anything to do with actual people renting the property as a short-term rental, right? So just seeing the numbers, there's more to that story, right? Every call, every case has a story behind it, and who is it and what
It's
is it?
complicated.
I think though, you raise a good point in reading in the comments. I think one of the things when we have further discussions or where we're going is we do have to differentiate between a short-term rental that is literally that and one that's in someone's house that they live in or one that's in an ADU right next to their home. And we've had some discussions among ourselves about, do you treat owner occupied properties that have a short-term rental differently than you treat out of town owned properties where there is mainly an investment property to bring money in. And those are interesting sorts of conversations to have that are a little different from what you're presenting, but I do appreciate the extensive comments, which kind of raise some of that up to a higher level for me.
And the nature of the calls, most prominently, and I'm just generally categorizing, were related to noise complaints, parking complaints, animal control, disputes, welfare checks, and potentially suspicious behavior. So that's just a summary of that data.
So bottom line, it's pretty low. Number of complaints and things.
I think that's one clear takeaway, at least from staff's perspective.
At least to the point somebody would call law enforcement. It doesn't mean that they're not doing anything that might, A, be worthy of law enforcement, but they're
Not here.
feeling like they don't want to bother law enforcement with their problem, or B, it's could be a code violation or highly annoying, but they're not.
Or in
not
the case of
calling
someone I
911.
know who likes the owner of the home, that rents it out as a short-term rental, and when there's an issue, tries to let that person know, but puts up with it the entire weekend that those particular people are there, because you've got that connection between the owner and the neighbor. So, this, all kinds of things like that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I believe why we have different mechanisms for kind of reporting these potential impacts. That being to the sheriff's office, if there's that kind of that level of concern, reaching out to city staff through a code enforcement complaints, or the availability of operator information to contact them directly, all with an effort to minimize those impacts associated with the properties.
Yeah, because you guys didn't provide numbers from code compliance. I mean, I know that's relatively young, but I mean,
Very few directly to code enforcement.
Yeah.
okay.
Previously presented that at the work session, and it was on the number of about 10 code enforcement complaints in the preceding, I think it was 3-year time period. I could double check that number, but relatively low is what kind of the takeaway was before.
May have an
But-
impact on terms of when the impacts are being felt, usually in the evening when code enforcement.
Code enforcement's not reachable, yeah.
Okay, transitioning to the next topic, unless there's other questions or comments related to that. Staff prepared and circulated a owner operator survey to a total of 122 individuals that represented not only owners of the individual property, but those operators, if either as a property management or those third-party providers such as Airbnb and Vrbo. And of those 122, I was very pleased to see that we had a response rate of 48% or 59 surveys that were completed. So that was great to have that level of engagement. Recognizing that's only a subset of those of the total, so we need to take this with nuance and kind of a grain of salt as respect to if it's the whole. I acknowledge, as some of the respondents noted, that there were some some functionality issues with some of the way the questions were structured, and staff takes responsibility
Told
for
you.
that.
Yeah.
They certainly did, and I appreciate that they went that far to say that. And you can run through it infinite number of times in test, but once it goes live, it's live. But I think again, we were able to, with the data that we do have and that level of engagement, we did get some valuable input, at least on this cursory level. I think notable takeaways is that nearly 90%, 89% own just one short-term rental within the city limits. 63 of those live in the Central Oregon region. 45% rent the entire property, as opposed to offering a room or a couple of rooms within that dwelling unit. Big takeaway for me was, and surprising outcome, was that 37% were rent their primary residence, meaning that that's their home for the majority of the year, recognizing that it would be those time periods, either when they're there, they rent those portions of the home, or as noted in some of the comments, it's when they're gone for the weekend or week, or they leave the region for a half the year, that they make it available for those short-term rentals. So that supplemental income opportunity. Yeah, please.
Question on the 63% live in Central Oregon. Is there a way to parse that to know whether they actually reside in the home that we're talking about, or do they just live in Bend or Redmond or Prineville or Madras? I mean, the number is an interesting number to me, but it doesn't really say residing in Sisters, which kind of gets that owner occupied question versus somewhere else. It was curiosity.
Sure, and we didn't drill down that far. We can do some
Probably was
comparative
one choice,
analysis.
they didn't know how to pick it.
Not on these, but some comparative analysis if we want to drill down farther
just
on
was
what
curious.
those responses were, and then how it compared to the primary residence.
So if 37% is the primary residence, that implies that their sisters
live
house
in
that
Sisters,
they're
Right,
renting
yeah,
is.
yeah.
So the other percentage, whatever that, 63 and
Yeah, we could,
37.
I was wondering if we could
Yeah.
kind of subtract one from the other, but yeah.
I mean, we
Big-
could do that. I would imagine we would get a harder number on that just based on the address, tax purposes
Sure.
associated.
Yeah, if we did that.
I think that's one
additional-
that we could get a hard number on. Some of them are, other ones are squishy, but.
And these are, again, this is kind of that initial high level response
observe.
rate. And I mean, within the Qualtrics survey software that we use, there's any number of analytics that could be drawn up if we want to drill down farther. Not surprisingly, most renters are vacationers. And that's followed by traveling workers that would come in for a limited period of time, but want to set up in a more home like atmosphere. And then again, not surprisingly, most occupancies are within the summer months, but there are occupancies nonetheless throughout the year. Now, many of the questions did have a free form opportunity to provide those comments as included in the survey. And as part of the staff report, staff didn't want to kind of really start to distill that down because it's so comprehensive and wide ranging and so valuable in its content. But as I attempt here in tonight's kind of supplementary presentation, I did want to address kind of those opportunities or issues, challenges with potentially renting those properties long-term as maybe a goal or an opportunity there. The challenges that I extrapolated were that personal use of the property, either as that primary residence or that they want to retain it as availability for their personal or family use of the property. There's just a disconnect between the cost and revenue that they can associate with offering the property as a short-term rental rather than long-term occupancy. Concerns over tenant issues and potential property damage. That's not only that they're they will be damaging the property, but that's a risk. But also finding qualified candidates that meet their threshold of criteria to be a long-term tenant, and challenges of finding those tenants. And Oregon's landlord tenant laws were identified as being challenging to work with, and the
They are.
protections that are afforded tenants under those
They are. And that
statutes.
probably has driven some of the single-family homes into short-term rentals for that very reason, because you don't have those same restrictions on a short-term rental that you would have with landlord tenant, and time it takes to do an eviction and the reasons for an eviction and those things is pretty complicated.
Right. And then we did ask, well, what incentives could be available to that, or to consider, that would kind of lead you towards or tip the balance for you to provide your property as a short-term rental. And again, a variety of ideas, but distilling those larger topics down to tax incentive or other financial incentives, either tax breaks, or many I saw was just some cash, to help supplement their incomes. And noting, I guess, similar to the challenges, that there's a disconnect between the revenue that can be generated, more revenue from a short-term rental versus long-term rental of a property. But also recognizing that if there was some security, that if I were to rent the property long-term in excess of that 1-year time period that's required under the short-term rental program, that they could retain the short-term rental license beyond that 1-year time period. So for example, if you were rent your property for 2 years, but you had a waiver of the short-term rental occupancy of a 3-year time period, that you could know that you could come back and revert back to short-term rental after, for whatever reason, that you come back out of long-term occupancy back to short-term rental operation.
So in that case, would the long-term rental legal restrictions apply then?
Yeah, during that long-term rental scenario, any of those landlord tenant kind of contract and protections or obligations, responsibilities would be in effect.
And one more follow-up question. On short-term rentals, the limit of what defines a short-term is what?
Less than 30 days.
Less than 30 days. Okay, thank you.
Per occupant, in other
Right.
words.
Thank you for
You could have multiple occupants in a year, but if someone stays more than 30 days, it's now considered to be.
correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that additional
I knew what you meant.
clarification. So to phrase that myself, yeah. So it's per rental, that rental occupancy is less than 30-day time period.
Thank you.
Although we have no real way of determining if that's being followed.
We do have our reporting that we request as part of short-term rental operation, but there's no other second source of information to affirm. So that's the extent of the summarizing the survey that I have in my comments today before I transition to the next. Okay. So now we're thinking about, changes to our program. And one of those most prominent and most impactful would be considering changing the concentration limits within the city limits, within around short-term rentals. Currently, any short-term rental or establishing a short-term rental is limited to not being located within 250 feet of another short-term rental. That separation distance or a concentration limit is not currently applicable to our commercial districts or condominiums, as I previously noted. The concentration limit is applicable to, as noted on the slide, our residential districts, both residential, the Pine Meadow Village, multifamily residential, or Sisters Business Park and Sun Ranch residential. I do want to note now, and we'll note later, that while we think about the impacts of our current and any potential changes, what our code is not applicable is, or does not contemplate, is homeowners associations or codes, covenants, and restrictions. City does not have an authority or requirement to enforce those, so that we do know some neighborhoods do have that level of restriction in not allowing short-term rentals. We only know that anecdotally at this point, but that's a consideration that we need to keep in mind as we think about the impact of any changes, that the numbers that we offer, there are a certain number and potentially a good number that would not be eligible regardless of changes to the buffer distance.
However, I see STR permits in this map in those neighborhoods that have CCNRs or HOAs that don't allow them. But, you know, again, that's, you know, the city, and those are
Not our problem.
not our problem, right? But I'm
Their
saying that,
problem.
I mean, I don't want to rely on that as
Right, no,
something, as a gatekeeper.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm with you on that one.
And that's a good recognition that much like our code, it's fluid and that can be changed. Those CCNRs can be changed too through that homeowners association, and then remove that prohibition and therefore eligible. So great point.
And it's easier than you think.
Harder.
Oh, I've been down.
So recognizing that this image is relatively small scale, I did want to drill down to particular regions of town just so you can see the overall impact. So side by side, in the yellow color scheme is the 250-foot concentration limit, acknowledging that where it's applied or shown on the map, it shows where it would apply in the highway commercial district if we were to apply that concentration limit within the highway commercial, noting that we don't have any short-term rentals in the highway commercial district at present, or I believe even any residential uses in the highway commercial district. And then in the purple color scheme would be the increase of that concentration limit to 500 feet. And you do immediately recognize that you start to eliminate properties in the McKinsey Meadow Village in relatively large number. This is the multifamily residential district in the west part of town as one comparison. But if we overlay those, you really start to see the impact of what the increase in the buffer would be.
The impact would not go into the commercial district though, even though it's showing it there.
It's showing here because has been noted as a consideration to apply the concentration
Okay.
limit to the commercial districts.
Okay,
But if it were to remain exempt, it would not
okay,
extend into that area.
thank you.
And I'm noting too that with this analysis, it just offers the buffer, not zone boundary identification,
Right.
meaning that this area to the north is outside the city limits. Down to the south, we have.
Oh darn, I was gonna put a short-term rental over there. Darn.
Then also the public facilities and institutional district to the south that does not allow the residential uses and therefore short-term rentals. So that is shown here, but not eligible to begin with.
Thank you.
Other large-scale maps, just to give you an idea. This is up in the northern region of town, in the Sun Ranch Residential District. Recognizing that with the expansion, it does effectively eliminate the entirety of that neighborhood and potentially some lots to the west. And I thought this map also, which is kind of the central southeast portion of town, including downtown, really shows the saturation that ends up happening with not only our current buffer. Again, the buffer itself is in the darker yellow or orange. The ineligible properties in the lighter yellow. is our current standards, which a good portion of the residential district and the Pine Meadow Village are currently ineligible. And with the expansion, you've all but eliminate the entirety of those zone districts, and then also to the northeast as well. And I don't have the zone boundary identified here with the downtown commercial district. Applying that concentration buffer is going to have a substantial impact. And noting that when we talk about the numbers of the eligible properties, that's one point in time. If a new short-term rental were to be established, all of those properties in that surrounding buffer would be eliminated. So this is kind of not quite exponential, but a significant impact. For example, if you were to establish a short-term rental, just example's sake, here in the downtown commercial district and that concentration limit were applicable, that would all but eliminate the entirety of downtown with one more short-term rental.
Do you have any like just raw numbers on today with the 250 buffer, how many properties or parcels would be eligible if they had applied for a permit? And if the 500 was traded, what is that number down to?
It's a great transition.
Yeah, we've got 15 minutes for discussion left.
Okay.
Point.
And this is my last slide. So just acknowledging that included in the staff report is what is that impact? And so currently, if we were to apply here are the tax lots that are located within the buffer. So we're doing the inverse of which properties within those districts are eligible. I went at it from a percentage standpoint. So while under a 250-foot buffer, for example, a residential district, 26% are eligible. With an increase, that drops down to 14%, or a limitation of approximately 110 fewer lots would be eligible. Multifamily, that would drop to 28%, or 144 fewer lots. Again, this doesn't account for those CC&Rs that may be impactful. And just noting and highlighting the downtown commercial district going from 0 properties impacted, 250 foot would make 47% less than 50% eligible. 500 foot would just limit that to only 11% of properties. So we're putting out raw kind of numbers or some cursory analysis, but kind of the takeaways are, what are your impressions of that? And then how does that influence one way or the other what potential direction this project may take, and potential changes to consider to the code?
I see, at least 4 questions that we need to answer. I don't know that we need to answer conclusively tonight, but I look at this whole issue personally on, wouldn't changes that we make here increase the availability of affordable housing in Sisters, and would changes to the short-term rental code improve the livability of current residents? After reviewing this, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What do you see as the strongest information or evidence, if any, that would indicate that greater restrictions on short-term rentals would result in more affordable housing in Sisters?
I think from we're drawn from that survey, I think, is the biggest takeaway, because we don't have the numbers of what the properties are, the valuation on properties, or what rental rates would be for those particular properties. I didn't see that while some were interested, a strong appetite for providing their properties for long-term rental. And within there were concerns that their properties may not be affordable or be able to be offered at an affordable rate. So if your question's directed at affordable housing within the city, I don't know that there's going to be a market influx or increase in availability of housing units with any
That
changes.
was my sense as well. And I think that's very unfortunate because I'm sure that there are many people and sisters who think and have presented to us, if we could just eliminate those short-term rentals, that would just take care of our affordable housing problem. And this doesn't give me any hope in that regard.
I will
I
offer up
yeah.
if I may.
Mhm.
I agree that this is, we got to this problem and there's many reasons why we did.
Mhm.
And addressing short-term rentals, I feel like is one opportunity. I don't see this, whatever we do is not going to solve the problem, but hopefully move the needle. And I think in regards to freeing up housing, I think some of the properties, looking at the map and knowing places, I know that there's $1 million homes that are short-term rentals, and I know that there are $400,000 homes and less, or units that are, affordable. I feel though we have a across the board housing crunch. So whether you have $300,000 or $1 million, you're going to have a hard time buying a house in Sisters, period. And I feel like opening up, even though some people are making the argument that, oh, my property wouldn't be affordable anyway. And that's for like, if it was for sale or maybe even for rent, for instance, there's a portion of the population that can still afford that. And, what that does is shift, because there's people, if they really want to be here, they're probably in some sort of housing that they don't want to be in until something better comes along, there's just no housing here. There's almost nothing on the market. And it's been like that for a long time, so I think you
There's
would
nothing on
see
the market to rent.
rent or buy.
Is that even?
No.
Well, I see for rent signs all over. But it's just that the rents are high enough that they don't fill up instantly, possibly, or, yeah, I think that.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah,
Or
and
they're
I
too
totally get what
small or, yeah.
you say. I just feel like, creating a hole anywhere in the system would be beneficial at this time, because it will shift people. And even if it's $1 million homes or $4,000 rents or something, we still need doctors. We still need people who have high incomes that can afford that in our community. I know that people would make that argument, like there was $1 million house on my street that sold a couple years ago and got turned into an STR. And I was upset about that. And somebody said to me, well, it's not like a teacher can afford that. And I was like, well, I don't, but the doctor can, and we need doctors. And that doctor might have a spouse that's a teacher. And so then we would get both, but now we get none of that. So I get it. I know this is,
I just
whatever
don't
we
want
do
people
is
to
not,
see it as a
right.
panacea of, oh,
Right.
we'll
Oh,
see-
no,
if
it
we
won't.
just hammer down on these short-term rentals, that'll take care of all our problems.
If I may,
Piece in the puzzle.
if I may interject, 'cause we haven't got much time left. Real
Yeah.
Quickly, I think that to me, the 500-foot buffer is a no-brainer. I think the discussions become what we're going to do about the downtown core. I think there are some strong arguments that might not want to be there as part of it. I think we do have a strong argument while we may want to look at multiplexes and condos as being subjected to that. I think that's an area where you have people who bought investment property expecting to be able to do precisely that, and that may free some of that investment property up. And so I think that that kind of speaks to your argument, but also speaks to your argument. It's not a panacea, but I also believe we have to move the needle somewhat. And I think 500 is reasonable. And I also believe that as we look at some of the comments, we need to take some of those into effect about as we do things, folks with owner occupied residences with a room or an ADU that they're renting. To me, that's kind of a different ball of wax than folks that have a property that some people say, hey, I'm making $130,000 a year on some of the comments. Why would I want to give it up? And I also want to throw one more thing on, because there was some mention about changing the one to a higher number. Why? I don't see where that benefits us in our discussion. I think that there are some permits that are rented 1 day a year. I'd rather have an STR that's running 1 day a year next to me than an STR that's running 30 days a year next to me. So I don't see any benefit to our increasing the number as an incentive to eliminate STRs. I think all it's going to do is actually exacerbate the problem. So I would keep it at one and let, if someone wants to tie a license up, more power to them.
So you see short-term rentals in Sisters as a problem?
I see it as one piece of the puzzle. And I think it is, I believe realistically, it comes down to livability in a neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I
That's,
think
that's where I see
housing-
it.
Affordable housing is the one reason we did it. Livability
Yes.
is
So
another.
I think the livability is a stronger argument than the affordable housing.
Even after seeing the statistics about,
I, you know, I gonna reflect kind of what Jennifer said, is that not everybody recalls the sheriff because it's like people next door having a loud party, keep them up till 2 a.m. But that is a livability issue. And,
absolutely it is.
or someone parks
I
in
have
front of your
one, two
house and you
doors
can't get your
down.
car parked. That's a livability issue. So I think that that's a piece of that discussion. But I'm with you. We're not gonna move the needle very far on the affordability, but we have to do something, and that's a start. And there may be some small ADUs and some other things that come out as a rental, like for one person.
Right. Susan?
Yes. So I strongly feel that increasing to 500 buffer is called for. And I also think that we don't need to do that in the commercial zone at all. I do know that there are statistics that show that if you have a bevy of STRs in a community, the availability of rentals goes down. And it not only impacts affordable housing, but it also impacts workforce housing, which could be the 50 to 80% range. I would like us to consider not only the increase in the buffer, but also to look at ways we might affect the grandfathered STRs. And I would suggest that we might be able to do it in this way, where the first resale, it's grandfathered. The second resale of the property, it's grandfathered. But on the third resale, that new owner would have to resubmit a request for an STR. I think if we did it that way, we might be able to satisfy the current owner being able to sell, and then the second owner knows that they only are going to do this the 1 year, and then the third owner knows that they aren't getting it. So that would be my suggestion. And that way we can reduce the STRs in town. Yeah.
So it sounds like we're going to not agree on anything in particular in the next 2 minutes.
And then
Do
I didn't
we-
get to,
Pardon?
I didn't get to say what,
Oh, you can absolutely
Okay.
say, I'm just trying
Yeah,
to say,
we're
I
not gonna
don't-
get into-
I think
yeah.
do we want to postpone this discussion? Do we want to go over into our regular meeting? What do we want to do?
Well, maybe we only need like 5 more minutes.
No.
No,
no.
I mean, just to wrap this.
no,
Okay.
not for me.
We also have goal setting coming up in a couple weeks where the council will have kind of structured and unstructured time to kind of talk about current goals and future goals. And I think this might be a continuing topic. There's still work to do.
Is there time in the progression of what we're doing here where we need to finish this up timely?
I don't think there's any time restrictions on getting this done, other than it's a council goal for this fiscal year and we want to
So
try to meet
before
that,
June,
but,
yeah. Okay.
certainly no artificial time frame. I was just going to offer up that this would be helpful to get a little more direction so that we can bring more information back to you for another work session, that you can continue to kind of hash these out. If we can get kind of maybe an understanding of what additional information we could provide, or some feedback on some other things you want us to present, then
Well,
there's no limit to the number of work sessions we can have. for
Right.
this.
I would personally like, and I don't know if council agrees, but I'd personally like a look at what we can do relative to the grandfathered.
Well, I think you said it was a question for legal, and it's worth at least running it by legal and seeing where we're at. That's what we pay the legal for, so that would put that question to rest fairly easily.
That could be its own standalone topic
Yes.
to bring forward again.
Right. And I think Council Letts still hasn't finished what you say, so.
Oh, yeah, I just quickly, some of my gut feelings are that, I mean, some things I want to discuss are a complete moratorium, probably temporary in nature, certain amount of time. I mean, that's one thing we could do quickly is just say, no more permits for 6 months, a year or something until we can really hash out a vision. I mean, just an option. And, I, yeah, I don't feel like we need to necessarily ban them in the commercial areas because I feel that's ultimately the best place for them to be. The market is shifting, which I was hoping was going to happen. And as we see with like the development behind City Hall across the street, the cluster homes being built and other properties in town, the hospitality industry is shifting to accommodate the desire of patrons to have something that's more homey. And, capitalism's supposed to fix all of our problems, right? So it's creeping in that direction, which I think is positive. And yeah, and ultimately, in the big picture, I don't have a huge problem with somebody renting out a room or if they have an ADU, because the standard right now is that if there's more than one unit on a parcel, only one of those units can be an STR. Is that correct?
Correct.
So there's that built in, which I like.
Yeah.
I really don't like single family residences being used as STRs. A hard stop, except if it is somebody's primary residence and they're renting it out 3 months out of the year or something like that when they're gone to Hawaii for the winter or something like that. If it's their primary legal residence, they pay taxes here and they vote here. I can bend on that. I just feel like all of these single family homes being locked up is a huge problem. And that's kind of where I would draw the lines. But obviously the discussion needs to go on.
Yes, we need to have another meeting. One thing that I became aware of reviewing this that sunk in is this community sense that short-term rentals are expanding exponentially and taking over the community, and that's just not true number wise. So I think the fear is greater because of the articles we read about short-term rentals in general. And people try to extrapolate, well, that's what's happening in Sisters. So I was glad to see that. After reviewing all of the comments, it became much more personal to me than it had been before, because the comments were, I could put myself into that person's reasoning for why they were having a short-term rental and what their needs were. And the vast majority of them were from Central Oregon. They weren't outside folks, and that this was allowing them to stay in the community where they couldn't afford to before. So I became much more personally involved in some of the reasoning behind all of this. So I don't know what further information I would encourage council to recognize that we have asked staff to do this survey and that we've been very, very lucky in that we had such a huge response to this survey. And yet I feel like the results of the survey are not necessarily showing us what the preconceived notion was. And yet we're kind of going down the same path we were before we did the survey, like as if it had no impact. And I want to make sure that we recognize what the survey was for and take it into consideration, because I think it was very, very useful. Changed my mind on a lot of things.
I was going to real quickly. One thing that was in the comments that I thought was interesting, and it may be worth really investing the dollars to have that company do it. They listed a company that goes out and does a survey of short-term rentals in an area to pick up all the illicit ones, because what they do is they go through all the VBRO listings and they really look at addresses and stuff. And several of the responders said, there's a lot of around town that you guys don't know about, and you need to address that. So it may be as we move forward, if we are restrictive and we do some restrictions, I think one of the things we ought to have in our database in the background is, we did this survey. It's less than you think, it's more than you think, it's about what you think, the same kind of a thing. And we don't have the staff to do that, but there are companies that they just basically punch in the database and hit on the computer and it chews it out in about 30 seconds and they charge you lots of money.
I think we have Julie.
And I would like just one more.
Yeah.
One more suggestion would be, I would like us to think about having a cap on the number of permits and then have a wait list. So that's another way of limiting maybe after a moratorium, but
I like the
That's another
moratorium idea.
Okay, do you have enough to get us
Hey,
rolling
Wait.
on another?
Is
Yeah,
the
we'll
water-
continued conversation and get it drilling down much further. So I appreciate the time tonight and the extended time. I think what I can come back with is some of that legal analysis on the transferability. I think there's opportunity to look at some of those strategies that other communities have employed in some of their changes. Councilor Letts and her comments about kind of, I highlight those because it said it succinctly that, looking at, those that it's their primary residence and kind of affording some difference for that. I'm just using my words. And I've also noticed that the term hosted rentals are out there and used in many communities. That meaning that it's that the owner is present on site. So you are renting either your ADU or a portion of your home. So there's that. It's still a primary residence and it's affords that supplemental income. So there's different strategies folks have or communities have used. So it's continued conversation later with a little bit more information or
Thank you
considerably
so
more.
much,
So-
and we are adjourned until.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm back. Welcome. I call to order the 6:45 City Council regular meeting. It's January 24th, 2024. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Guess we should do roll call just for the record.
Mayor Preden,
I'm present.
Council President Blum,
Here.
Councilor Letts,
Here.
Councilor Ross,
Present?
Councilor Cobb.
Here.
Next up is the approval of the agenda. There's no changes, I don't believe, so
Move approval of the agenda.
Second?
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Okay, that was everybody. Visitor communications?
So, yeah, I sent out about 3:30 today an email from Rosemary Vasquez. I think that you either all received it or can look at it a little longer. It was regarding statement about the houseless. And then tonight I have present for the first speaker is Karen Rugg.
Karen, welcome. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. State your name and address and we'll give you about 3 minutes if that's okay. Is that
Okay.
enough?
Yeah, that should be.
Well, whole meetings.
I'm sorry.
Thanks for putting up with us.
Oh. Yeah, good evening. My name's Karen Rugg. My partner and I own a lot at 154 East Adams, which is one of the 3 remaining undeveloped lots of the Adams Street Commons, which is a master plan community on the corner of Fur and Adams in the downtown commercial district. And I wanted to come here today and talk to you about the short-term rental policy because I think our situation is unique. And so I just wanted to add a different voice to the conversation. We purchased the lot at the end of 2021, and per the master plan approval, this lot is zoned for mixed use. And due to the current development code, it can't be changed, so that's what we're working with. The bottom floor is going to be commercial, and the upper floor will be 3 one-bedroom residential units. Since 2021, we have spent a significant amount of money to develop this property. Development has taken longer than normal because we're trying to build a first of its kind commercial building in the US using hempcrete. which is a fire-resistant, healthy, sustainable building material. And if you guys want to have questions about it later, I can answer all of those. But it's taken us a lot longer. We've had to get independent fire testing, coordinate with county, coordinate with others. And so now we're here and the design is done. We've got the go-ahead and we're working on financing. And this project has always been envisioned using short-term rentals because the purpose of it is to get as many people in the building as possible so they can experience the building material. And in addition, it's the short-term rental income that makes this project feasible. Without it, the project doesn't pencil out. So we did our due diligence, and prior to purchasing the lot, we confirmed with the city that we'd be able to do short-term rentals. After we bought the lot, we confirmed with the city that we could do it before we spent all the money on development. And now if the policy is changed in the downtown commercial district, we've lost a significant amount of money, 2 years' time, and then the opportunity cost that goes along with that. And we're not big developers. We don't have deep pockets. We're doing this because it's a purpose-driven project and it's not a paycheck. And it will be it'll be a small paycheck, but we're doing it to try and bring something to the community because we believe in it so much. And in our situation, even a concentration limit would restrict our ability to do short-term rentals because the building right behind us is operating. They've got 4 short-term rentals in that building. So I understand the need to review the short-term rental policy and its effect on affordability in Sisters and its other effects. I'm concerned that in the downtown commercial district, too restrictive a policy could backfire. And I think short-term rentals can have positive impacts to a small community like ours if the policy is sensible. Regarding affordability, I know developers in the downtown commercial district that's all they want to do is develop permanent affordable housing with their land. And so you see a lot of the land that's undeveloped. It's undeveloped right now because it's too expensive to develop this affordable housing. I'm working with one of those landowners, and that's where he's at right now. And so I'm wondering if maybe there's potential, and maybe this is already being done, where the taxes from the short-term rentals can be used to fund some of the affordable grants, affordable housing grants. I'm not sure if that's an opportunity. And then I know for the downtown commercial district specifically, the development code states the zone is meant to enhance visitor accommodations and tourism amenities. And so I think limiting STRs in this district would do the opposite of that. I don't know if this is possible. I know it's more administrative work. In a situation like ours, I'm wondering if you can tie the short-term rental code to at the time the lot was purchased, so that you can avoid any, potential property right issues, and then provide the, confidence to the developers that they can develop the project that they envisioned, such as in our case. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Peter Hoover?
Welcome, Peter.
Welcome, long time no see. It's been all, what, 15 minutes?
Yeah.
I'm Peter Hoover. I'm the Executive Director of Sisters Habitat for Humanity, 382 Eastwood Avenue here in Sisters. Come before you tonight with a request that, as I'm sure many of you are aware, Sisters Habitat for Humanity has envisioned that we are going to do some extensive work to have an impact on both the affordable housing and workforce housing supply here in Sisters. Along those lines, as we all know, one of the elements that's involved is funding. And we have an application that we're in the process of submitting to the Oregon Community Housing Services Department for a little over $3 million for affordable housing. That's the first phase of the funding that we're seeking. It's been indicated to us by OHCS that one of the scoring criteria in their consideration of applications is support from the community. And so I would ask that the council take into their consideration whether or not they would be willing to submit a letter of support to us to include in our application to OHCS for the little above $3 million grant that we're seeking. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
We won't be asking questions, but what I can say is I will bring it up in the mayor council business and we'll discuss it up here
Can't
at the
ask,
proper time of the meeting. Sorry about that.
can't ask any more than that. Thank you for your time.
But you're gonna have to stick around a little longer. Thank you. Appreciate it. And just a heads up, we'll talk about that and see what everybody thinks, okay? Sorry, we can't flip the script around. That's just how it goes. Is there any more visitor communication? All right. I haven't done this before, but I'm gonna start to do it every city council meeting. Thank you for coming up here. I know it's not easy, sometimes, and some of these, coming up before council is not easy for everybody, so thank you for participating. We appreciate it very much. Next up is the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was everybody. Thank you, everybody. All right, on to council business. Looks like we've got, a resolution, 2024-02. It's an interfund loan.
Already been discussed.
Yeah, we have to do this again?
We like to do it again.
Now that you're
Go.
on city council.
We'll see
which spiel is better, the URA one or this one. So thank you very much for your time tonight. So this is the City of Sisters participation in the mechanism to move funds in the Urban Renewal Agency from the debt fund to the project fund. So again, the debt fund's sole purpose is to collect the tax increment financing and pay debt, while the project fund participates in the capital projects. In order to free up some of that incremental money from the debt fund and put it into the project fund, it has to be transferred via a loan. And so the only other way to get that loan, at least the path of least resistance, if you will, is from the city to the URA. And so the city will loan the URA project fund $500,000, and then the URA debt service fund will in turn repay the city that same $500,000. And that's it in its simplicity.
I think that was better.
It was a little bit
That was
better.
better than the art. It was a little more
I
succinct.
wasn't thinking about the flow chart and Carrie's take. You know, if
Yeah.
I mention that, then she gets.
But
her-
where is it? I mean, no.
Well, if we put it up, then I owe her like a cup of coffee or something.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments on it?
And this has been in the budget for 23-24, by the way.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, if there's no questions,
I move approval of resolution number 2024-02, approving indebtedness related to an in-fund loan of $500,000 for the general fund for urban renewal projects.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Does anybody have any final comments? All right. We appreciate what you're doing.
course.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that was everybody.
Thank you.
Passed.
Yeah.
Bada bang. All right. That concludes our council business. Other business?
No.
No?
Another one. Don't we have resolution 24-03?
I don't know.
That was on consent.
That was on consent.
Oh, consent. Okay, thank you. That's why it was out of order.
Man, you're freaking me out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Flipping stuff.
Don't make me use the gavel. Just kidding. No, it's on the staff comments. City
Yeah.
Manager Wheeler, how's it
Yeah.
going?
It's going great.
Good to
Happy
see
New
you,
Year.
Wheels.
It's good to be back. Sorry for missing the last meeting. Thank you to Carrie for filling in and the rest of the team. And I wanted to start with, we're in the middle of winter. We had our first winter storm. And I wanted to thank our Public Works crew. We're doing a great job again. Even being a little shorthanded, I would say. I think, we have in our plans and currently recruiting for another utility worker position. I think this city can handle having more. The crew is great. They do a great job in the team that they have. And it was on Saturday, dumping, and I think, our approach of, making sure that we wisely use our manpower and how we use it, of coming in, cleaning up the town at night, getting the snow out of the way, works pretty well for us. And with the contract that we use for cleaning the downtown sidewalks, I think is appreciated. And there's always, it's kind of art and a science to it, right? Of how to handle when you call them out, and making sure that you don't clear it and then all of a sudden it's 6 inches of snow again. So using our resources wisely, but we do appreciate what they do and doing the overnight work and overtime and everything. Speaking of snow, we wanted to debrief a little bit about the effort and the resolution, and then opening up the Main Street building for the cold weather shelter. Carrie and I, Counselor Cobb, Counselor Ross, we attended a debrief, at least part of it today, to kind of learn about how it went, lessons learned, successes. And I wanted to thank the Sisters Cold Weather Shelter, the volunteers, Oregon Office of Resiliency and Emergency Management, and their assistance. We met Haley today, who did a lot of the overnight monitoring, but there was a lot of volunteers that, including Counselor Cobb, that helped with that effort. I think in terms of numbers and the folks that they were able to help or provide shelter for, got up to 5 or 6, I think, by the last day, including 5 or 6 during the days. I think on Sunday and Monday when the library was closed and it was really cold daytime temperatures. So, with tonight's resolution, that emergency will be in effect. So if another facility, or if we need to activate the Main Street building again, we have the parameters and we have the resolution in place. I think some of the feedback was that it was a quick turnaround, which we knew going into it, that it would be a heavy lift for them to get the volunteers. And so recognize that being able to pull that together on short notice, I think is, again, just this community's coming together, pulling together volunteers, people coming out to bring dinners and staffing and being present is pretty remarkable. So thank you to the community.
Big hauls shoveling snow. I mean, they were
Oh,
out
yeah.
there,
Yeah, and even staff.
doing
I mean,
extra stuff.
we had staff too participate in shoveling snow, and I wanted to thank Carrie too for doing the coordination and working with them to make that happen. So looking ahead, we'll do our best to watch the forecasts and, align that with what the parameters are in the resolution, including the resolution adopted tonight would help in terms of daytime, right? With that, if, there's cold temperatures and a significant weather event in the daytime and the library or other alternatives are not available, we would allow for that. And we'll continue to communicate with the neighborhood and the public. Carrie went door to door, and the feedback was great. I think people, if anything, were like, great, this is great, and thanks for doing this. And if there's some lessons learned, is that it's hard to predict the weather, it's hard to forecast these things, and then also just the capacity to keep something like that staffed. So I would open up to council too, if you have other comments from the debrief or how that went.
I think they were pretty complimentary, both to themselves and to us. We got, after you folks left, there was a little bit of griping from one individual about the fact that it closed, and then didn't get reopened back up because they didn't have the staff and everything else. And actually, it was a continuation of something you pointed out, is that I think Carrie said, we use the National Weather Service forecast. And that's what we go off. And it said we were going to be fine. And then after all, it was closed and everything happened that night, it flipped and we got that ice storm came in. You can't be right 100% of the time. But we sure as heck try. And I think the other thing that they learned from it is that they need to do a little bit more organization around the concept of mobilization, that they need to have a better strategy for mobilizing on a short notice when things come up. And also staffing on a short notice. So they were willing to look at what they could have done better. And generally speaking, other than somebody saying, why can't we just keep this building forever? It's really nice. It went real well.
Yeah, it's been a while since one of these things have been stood up in the community, I think, and that's important to recognize.
And I would mention that there were a number of things that were written down on big sheets of paper by Councilor Cobb. And they're going to get all that together in some kind of electronic format and get it to Carrie. So we'll have a chance to see that at a later time.
I just played note taker.
Oh, okay.
You did a good job too.
Yeah, it wasn't me
legible.
So you just kind of,
creating things.
so it'll be like a summary, a little bit of what was said by just
Yeah,
all kinds of different
it
people.
was sort of like a, lessons learned kind of thing.
Yeah.
I would like to add relative the emergency resolution that the next time we might consider a different temperature degree, like in Washington State, they use 34 degrees as the key that says now we open up the shelter. In Texas, it's 32 degrees. Florida, it's 40 degrees.
They have a lower
Yeah, lower
different
tolerance.
yeah.
So, but I think we could reconsider that being high desert and how cold it does get here. I would just like us to think about that. I'd also like us to think about what possibilities there are to help those unhoused people who will not leave their shelter because they don't want to leave their pet. And I'm not saying we should solve it. I just think that it would be nice for us to kind of, think of options or possibilities. And that's all I wanted to add.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just as mayor, I just want to thank the cold weather shelter for doing it. I know it wasn't easy. It was a little bit of short notice. We tried to have discussions with them as early as we could, but again, we're basing a lot of this on weather, and weather's very hard to predict. And once we saw that storm coming, Carrie was on it, and man, I appreciate staff and everybody. We were kind of lucky that it was happening right after our meeting. I mean, if it had happened 4 days before the meeting, we would have had a lot of trouble trying to mobilize ourselves. So we were kind of lucky in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it was certainly way better than nothing.
And I also want to add, the community really stepped up with hot meals and supplies. And in fact, they were almost had too much at one point. So it's the community's not uncaring and unfeeling. I think that, that the sooner that they can figure out how to make this run the way they need it to run and identify a potential location that they could be used in the cold weather, or locations, plural, I think it will help the process a lot more. But everybody stepped up and it worked. Until the ice came.
To take the mayor's term Sisters Way, we had a meeting today with County Behavioral Health to kind of hear about, what they're seeing out there and the work that they do. The point in time account is happening right now. They have already some numbers in the first couple days of that. So in addition to, David Fox and Behavioral Health that's out there assisting folks with those needs, the cold weather shelter is going out there. They do a lot of just on-site, delivery of services, propane, blankets, keeping people warm. And then, CLI, the Community Leadership Initiative and the work they're doing. And we heard it again today from Behavioral Health that it's different here in what, is happening in terms of the community and the folks that are out there helping the houseless around our city, the type of volunteerism that occurs, and how we're helping manage kind of the campsites out there and keeping them stable. So it was good to hear. And I think, to kind of thank the cold weather shelters that they've done a lot of work, the last couple of years when there hasn't been a shelter to help stabilizing people, the weather in the forest. So that needs to be acknowledged too when we're talking about, 4 or 5 people came to the shelter. Well, they're doing a lot of work too, doing outreach out there to keep folks warm and safe in the forest too. So,
And they think that actually decreased the number of people that came to the shelter. That was one of their comments.
okay, switching.
Well, before you switch,
Oh, okay.
on the point in time count, they did note today that they are up to 70 people in our forest
That was Lou.
in the count. Yeah,
Lou,
Lou
Lou
noted
said
that.
his point in time count.
Oh, his. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we heard a different number so far, but
Yeah.
Thank you for Monday night with the goal setting session. I'm sure you may talk about that with your report. I think the open house was great. I appreciate the participation. I think we had 30
30 to 35.
30 to 35, both, a lot of residents, business owners. We had, of course, board and commission members, which is great to get that input too. So we're compiling the notes and we'll prepare that with the rest of the goal setting package. We got the online survey that's still out there until I think Friday.
Friday, yeah.
We're over 100 comments on there. I think I've mentioned to all of you, they're very thoughtful, very constructive comments and ideas. So
you're gonna have a nice packet of things to read through for your goal setting, which February 6th at 9 o'clock should be on your calendar for that.
9 PM.
Yeah.
Great. Love it.
Yours, right?
Be a slumber
9
party.
a.m.
Bring your jammies.
Yeah.
And
Beignets for everybody.
some things staff will probably report out on. We got a number of RFPs that are out right now. Earlier tonight, we talked about the workforce housing program. We have the affordable housing grant program is out right now with applications due March 1st, I believe. Carrie, you probably want to maybe give an update on the Main Street building lease RFP, which is out also until I think a couple more weeks, and then the UGB amendment RFP for a consultant is also out until I think mid-February. So a lot of things out there. We're waiting to get back. So some exciting things in the works.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. We talked a lot about the cold weather shelter, but just wanted to reach out and say thank you to Jackson for his help because he was also doing a lot of organizing with snow removal and stuff, but did step in and make sure that we were set up fire-wise in that building. So I appreciate that. This week, welcome Rebecca. Super happy.
Yay.
And Jennifer asked a good question today, like at what point do we transition things that you're sending to me to maybe register events and those things on to Rebecca? And we'll work through that probably in the next couple of weeks or so. So you can continue to send to me and then we do them together so she learns how to do stuff and then we'll transition. We don't want to also throw everything at her too much. We still want her next week. And then the RFP for the Main Street building that went out a couple weeks ago. It is due February 9th. We already have one proposal in. I showed the building today and I show it to 2 people tomorrow and another person on our group on Friday. So there's quite a bit of interest in that building, which is great. So I'm happy about that. And I have one ask of the council. So they're due February 9th. We'll probably do the review of proposals late the following week or the next week. I don't have dates yet, but either week, probably 3 of February. And I need or would like at least 2 counselors on that review process since it's such a public building. And if you guys tonight can discuss that and maybe choose who you might want to be on that with us since we don't have another meeting until the 14th.
Do you have an idea of how long and when? Because that will make a big difference on our schedules.
Yeah, I'm sure it would take us probably at the most an hour and a half. I can't imagine it would be much more than that.
Okay, we'll put 2 hours.
So we'll say 2 hours.
No, it's not, you have to put 3.
It depends on if I'm there.
We'll talk for a half an hour, so.
Yeah, I'd need to recuse myself because I know one of the people that's put in an RFP for the
Okay.
Main Street.
So I would say it would be we have a meeting the week of the 14th, so I could see us doing that maybe the 15th.
Chances are you're all gonna know somebody.
Yeah.
If
that'd be an
we're gonna
interesting-
have a handful. of proposals.
And I'm out of town from the
Okay.
12th through the 22nd.
Gary's out.
Okay,
I would love to do it. I really would,
okay.
especially with my facilities background, but
Yeah, I probably, I'm
We can
trying to
work
think.
around your schedules. That's great.
Tomorrow is,
Yeah, we can work around schedules. We don't have to
Okay.
set on a hard date
Yeah.
right now for certain.
I
Well,
would
if I don't have to recuse, I'm fine with it.
Anybody?
I want to.
yeah, like I said, I'd love to, but I can't.
I want to, but I can't.
Well, I can.
So you got 3
Is that okay,
possibilities.
You got
Susan
3.
and I did? You good with that, or you wanted it? I'm just asking, I'm not. You want to do it?
Yeah.
You can do it.
No,
You and
that's
Susan
fine.
can do it, I can do one less meeting.
No, I just,
said I want to, that's all. It's fine.
okay, no, yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
If the schedule is an issue, I'm probably.
How about if she could be alternate, if I'm too busy, I'll let you know. I
Okay,
do create meetings sometimes, and I have to cancel later.
And so I'll reach out as we get closer to.
Okay.
I
Thanks.
know dates and.
yeah, I think we'll
Thank
have
you.
enough.
Generally, I need a calendar invite sooner rather than later, so I don't accidentally place something else there, so
Perfect.
just let me know.
Okay. And I think that's it unless you have questions for me.
Oh. Good job, and as much as I love having a new person, Rebecca, welcome.
you.
I'm gonna miss you. I mean, I know I'm gonna see you a lot, but,
Go into this chair for a
You're
minute.
right. so,
I'll still be here.
thank you for all you've done. Okay.
Joe, do you have anything more?
I can be quick.
Sure. Oh, we like you coming up here. You
Yeah.
know.
Say,
Tell us a joke and
be quick or I can be slow.
Name, address, and you get 3 minutes. 3 minutes only.
3 minutes? Okay, I could do that. Just like to give a big thanks to you all, council. Paul and the crew, after this snow event, just we're talking about the equipment that we've invested in over the last few years and how much easier and more efficient it was to remove a lot of the snow. Before, when you're working with cumbersome bigger plows, it's a little bit more difficult, and you have to tape the bottom of your pants so mice don't maybe run up your pants because those trucks are a little older. So I think that the crew is really appreciative of the fact they were able to use their own rigs, and they're just much more versatile and efficient, like I said.
They
So
did a much better job of plowing in my driveway on a regular basis.
of course, well, you're the first one, right? Um, so for those of you who don't know, we have a URA report requirement. Every year, staff puts together a urban rural report. It has the plan, some budgetary items, per statute. So that's available on the website, and it's been published and noticed in the Nugget, just kind of for your information. We're almost done with the audit. I had a nice long conversation with the auditors yesterday. They should be done with most of the report. I just have to do the statistics after they get me the report. Should be done by the end of the month. Really good stuff there. Talk with one of their partners, and with just some ideas that he thought would kind of make our lives a little easier on the administrative end of things. So that was really well received. And then just budget committee engagement. So I've been trying to communicate a lot more with those folks to keep them kind of abreast of what's going on in the city. And some of the new members have asked a lot of very good questions and are taking a close look at the budget book. So that's really neat for a change. So been happy with that kind of engagement.
And the budget book is actually a somewhat friendly document. I mean, it's put together well. It's easy to go in and figure out what's going on.
It is now.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I meant that as a compliment.
I think that's one of the things the budget committee should have, is like a budget from 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
We should, in fact,
So
what
they
we should
can
do
see
is this
how
how we
far
can, this is how
we've
we can
come.
screen people. We can give them a budget from 10 years ago and tell them to look through it and tell us what they think. And if they run screaming from the room, we know we got the wrong person.
Yeah, maybe present it on ledger paper or something, the green bar. Yep. And that's all I have.
All right, any
Unless
questions?
you have any questions? Okay, thank you. That was less than 3 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, Scott.
You didn't talk about Excel at all, though. I'm kind of disappointed.
I know, computer's shut down and I'm missing it already.
So we're just moving along with some development code amendments, including our discussion tonight, but we're also continuing to proceed along with the building hardening and the defensible space. We're kind of decoupling those two and moving the building hardening one forward a little quicker than the other one per council's direction. We did just receive an application for an applicant initiated text amendment to our tourist commercial zone. We have a small little section of land, a couple parcels just to the north of here that are zoned tourist commercial, and there's some, the owners are looking at adding some other uses to those, to that zone, including RV park. So that is something that will eventually have to go through council for approval, but first through the planning commission. We're looking at considering next steps on the dark skies approval. In terms of, looking at dark sky certification, got some feedback from our consultant in terms of the steps to take relative to that. He recommended forming like a citizen committee made up of folks that are interested in this and having them really drive the show on that one. What he recommended was going ahead and trying to get vested with the current regulations. They change the regulations from time to time. Sometimes they make them more stringent. If we pay like a $250 pre-application fee, basically gets us vested under the current requirements, and our currently the way it stands, we do comply with that certification.
Okay.
We got that verification. We do need a letter of support from the council. Is this where I asked for that, for you guys to talk about that later? I'll stick around too to hear.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That'll work sometime.
Yes. Local stakeholders, letter of nomination from a dark sky member. You did say that it does take, they do ask for like 1 to 2 years of the ordinance actually being put into effect and kind of demonstration that, of its effectiveness before you apply. So we'll want to get going on that to get those steps in place and get the ball moving.
Before you move past that, how do we do that? Like through compliance numbers and, maybe show a couple of areas where maybe the city did something and maybe there was some citizen stuff too? And just kind
Or
of
just
narrate it?
or private development, complying with that.
Okay.
Ordinance, yeah.
Just interesting.
Yep.
Thanks.
Do a flyover with a camera.
Okay.
With a big bright light on it.
Yeah, flash.
So we'll also be, obviously a big component of that approval is also the 5-year timeframe for non-conforming lights and doing a big community education campaign prior to that. So we're gonna have to kind of put our heads together and kind of decide what that looks like.
Need to have this high school students involved.
I was thinking the same
The
thing.
citizen community.
Those two young ladies that were sitting in the back of that
Yeah.
meeting that were the ones that did
Even
the
if they
presentation, aren't in high
graduate.
school anymore. I was like,
Yeah, I was
wow,
gonna,
you really listened to us?
yeah.
We're lucky we got a lot of community members that
Yep.
would be interested in helping us out with that.
Sure.
Could you explain the letter of support a little bit more?
Just if the certification, the dark sky certification, if you go forward, they need a letter of support from the council, from stakeholders, and from another community, I guess, that is already or dark sky member currently. We can't find that. They thought that the Oregon Dark Sky Association would be sufficient for that. I did update, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I updated the website and put a lot of growth management information up there in anticipation of starting this UGB amendment process and trying to explain kind of why we are where we are, how history of a little bit about not the full history, that would take forever, the Oregon state planning law, but kind of a little bit of the background of how that law resulted in where we are now going forward with the UGB amendment, and hopefully can direct to use it as community education. And when people have questions, maybe if you guys come across constituents that have questions about it, you can refer it to that section of the website, and hopefully it will help answer a lot of questions. The UGB consultant RFP closes February 12th. I've gotten a couple of consultants that are sound like they're interested in submitting a proposal. We reviewed the draft, the governor's draft housing bill that has a lot of interesting things in there, planning wise, to help stimulate new housing, including a potential UGB, kind of a new UGB process, a one-time thing that communities can use if they meet certain criteria and certain size, that you can get one through basically a lot quicker than you would if you would go through the traditional way. The kicker is that you have to, a developer would have to provide 30% of their units as affordable. So it's an interesting tool that might get approval. So we've been asked to provide comments on that. We'll see how that plays out. You'll start seeing some tree removal out at the Sunset Meadows multifamily site. We've seen.
Already have, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a sign that the multifamily project's going to be starting here soon. And just wanted to note that we had a pre-application on the first proposal from some of those middle housing unit code amendments that we did last year for a triplex and a residential zone. You guys remember if we added some additional housing types into that zone, but we made it a conditional use. Looking at you, Councilor Ross, I think that was one of your.
Yep.
So.
Well, he just called you out.
No, I think I think
You
this.
saw me looking at him. You better tell me conditional use.
I think in this case, it'll be an effective tool. I'd be interested to see how it goes forward, but just wanted to note that we're seeing some real life application of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you got the yellow sign up yet?
Not yet. It's not an application yet. It's just a pre-application.
So I wanted to talk about the housing thing a little bit, just so everybody knows, housing initiatives and ideas are coming out of the governor's office, and they're also coming out of different places in the legislature because of the short session. It's going to be really interesting to see what final bills actually show up.
If any.
If any, well, I think they're going to have to come up with something because of all the push from different sides. The thing that's going to be interesting is what are the details going to be?
Yeah.
And nobody in this room, or I don't know if anybody in the state could predict what the final stuff's going to look like at this point, but it's coming hard and it's coming fast.
We know that.
So it's just going to be interesting. I don't think like I said, nobody can predict what it's going to end up being. So we just have to keep our eyes and ears open. And if there's something in there that we are just, we just can't swallow, we got to make sure they know about it so it doesn't get codified, so.
Quick question.
Yeah.
On the UGB, new UGB process to speed up, the 30% must be affordable. What is that affordable? Is that 60% and lower of AMI or
I think it was 80.
80%?
Remember, is it 80?
I'd have to check.
Yeah, I think it was around 80%.
Okay.
Yeah.
80 and lower?
Well, what if the UGB expansion only included commercial and industrial and didn't include housing?
This would be for something that's designated residential. It would
So
only,
you'd
it would only
only-
be for residential. Yeah,
So if you wanted to expand it for anything other than residential, then it wouldn't apply.
correct. Yeah, because the push right now is not
That's the
necessarily for
point of
more
it. I get it.
employment lands, it's for
Yep, I
housing.
get it.
And it's limited at 75 acres, is that right?
Yes.
At the moment, yeah.
Yep.
I mean.
That
yeah,
might
it
change
could
too.
change.
Any of that
Yeah.
can change, right?
But
Well, yeah, because it's a catch 22, because there's, you think, oh, this could be great for us. I mean, I know with the target, the recommended number was somewhere around 200 acres-ish, right? And you think, and on one side of it, you're like, well, this could be great because it would just be very quick and
Supposedly.
cheap and not
Supposedly.
supposedly, right, and on one side, but and then just, it's all very hypothetical, but would we get in, and this would just be for housing lands, would we, in reality, this could not replace our UGB discussion because, it wouldn't include any other lands
Right,
for any other uses, and we wouldn't be able to go, okay, we're good for 20 years,
right. It doesn't
No.
address the whole.
You have to do two.
And they haven't
processes.
identified all the accelerated part of it. The TLCD is still drawing up rules and there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
What it'll look like, it depends on which particular senator has a bunch of property that abuts another city.
Yeah,
That
that's-
Develop real quick into affordable housing and not have to go through the steps.
Again, that's another thing we just have to keep our eye on because we don't know what the final rules are.
Yeah,
So,
This says 130% for purchase,
that's considered affordable.
80% for rentals.
interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, better.
Well,
That's better.
that's workforce.
That's better.
Part of workforce, not all of it.
Right.
Thank you. Anybody have questions or anything? All right, thanks.
Public Works.
It's good to see you in person this time, by the way.
Kind of got a tan.
Yeah, kind of got it, yeah.
Oh, no.
I'm trying to figure out how our public works director knew to be in the Caribbean when the snowstorm hit. He's got to be clairvoyant.
The island vibe bodes well, as advertised.
Are you bringing big dollar signs to your speaking?
They had a water leak, and being a water geek, that we drove through every day, the whole time we were there. Finally asked the bus driver, I'm like, when are they gonna fix the water leak? 2, 3 months, maybe? Maybe
Island-
not.
Island time on.
Yep.
Very mellow.
Could have got a part-time job.
Pay is not,
Yeah.
I think I heard $14 a week.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, tough.
That'll get you to McDonald's.
Tough third world country for sure. Just a couple things. We are going to be taking the East Portal. We kind of did a little revised design scenario with Jackson and Jordan, and really kind of laid it out once we had the trees layered in to the design to really try to minimize the tree impacts, especially the large old growth trees. So we're going to lose a few parking spots, but we're a little more, I feel, creative with how to get parking in there and not just have it be a big parking lot. So we're going to take that to the Public Works Advisory Board along with kind of preliminary phasing plan for Barkley and work with that committee to help refine it and get it to a point where we can bring it to you guys and get the thumbs up and then potentially, hopefully get it funded for construction in this budget year. So that's going to happen in February, I believe the 14th meeting. And then the crew, they did, like everybody said, an awesome job. And hearing the things that happen beyond or with the snow removal, yet everybody's water line's freezing up. Well, when there's 18 inches on all the meter boxes, it makes it really difficult to find them to shut them off. And people are having burst pipes, and so there's a panic in there. And the classic one was the library. And they called over here, and Josh went over and multiple times during the event said, I think the valve is right there. And they'd scrape, and sure enough, it was right there, and able to shut services off, you know, in just a few minutes versus having to search for a half hour. And the amount of damage when water's flowing is exponential every minute it's on. So can't thank those guys enough. Can't brag enough about their capabilities, their longevity, their knowledge of our systems, and how it really is critical when it hits the fan. So, yeah.
How are
And
they
then-
doing over at the library? Do you know?
I saw them packing out vacuum or blowers, so sounded like they're making progress. Water's back on. Water is back on, I think, end of last week. So they got the repairs done. We got a couple things coming up in February before our next meeting. We're going to be taking down the snowflakes right about the 7th or 8th. The flags for President's Day are going to go up on the 9th. So we need to have those down. So that'll kind of be the end of, you know, our magical holiday season per se. So, and then we are working with C4C on the banner project for the high school students. We're going to have them up the month of April and the first week in March. And then we'll be taking those down and putting the rodeo flags or the rodeo banners up. So I think that's it. If there's any questions, more than happy to add. Good. All right.
Thanks. That's it. That's it? It's up to us now? Might as well just off the top, you want to talk about letter of support for Habitat? Yep.
Yes.
Let's let them folks get out of here. Is there anybody that doesn't want to do a letter of support? No. I mean,
We could all
Obviously-
raise our hand and watch his face fall. That
uh,
would be mean.
just get a letter to us so we can look at it and, right? I mean,
Yeah.
No
do
problem.
you have one written already? Sorry,
We could draft one up. Well,
we're gonna draft it.
yeah. Peter provides some more details.
There you go.
Yep.
Sorry, I should have looked over there first. I should have known better. Okay,
Okay.
good, done, right?
Right.
Okay. Does anybody want to talk about STRs in the commercial zone? I will not. But if anybody wants to talk about the speaker tonight or anything.
I would suggest that I think we left Matt a little hanging on what he needs to do next. And so, you know, I intend, and I heard Jennifer say, you know, the 4 issues that he wanted clarity on, we should give him some information. You know, the minimum days in a rental, is that important to us? The 500 feet versus the 250, the change in some of the zones, and transfer rights. So I'm not sure we gave him a real clear direction on it, because he wants to provide additional clarifying information, and I'm not sure we were real good about saying exactly what that was.
Well, I think we made it pretty clear on the transfer rights to talk with the attorney and see what can or can't be
Right,
done.
on that one.
I think I heard at least 2 individuals at the table, and this is just my hearing and find of fact, that there's not a lot of, interest in trying to extend that buffer into the downtown commercial zone. I think that I believe personally that that's what a commercial zone is for. But I'm speaking as one person. And, you know, so I think that there's that, and there were a couple other things on the list, but I agree that we have to give a little more direction and clarity, you know, and again, I think was the only one who spoke up and said, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see a need to increase the minimum number of days for an STR permit. I don't see the benefit to the city or to the permit holders by doing it. I mean, if I have an STR next door to me, one night's a lot better than 5 and a lot better than 30. So I just think you leave the permit process where it is and don't mess with that number.
Okay, and
regardless of what came out of the planning commission.
I'll chime in with my, on the minimum, I do think there's an interest to have like a minimum of, say, once a month. Or, so, it doesn't have to be once a month, but 12 a year. Just because that would kind of dissuade the people that just want to have an STR just so nobody else has an STR. And then I agree that, increasing to 500 from 250 in the various residential zones. And I also agree with Gary that there's no sense having any of the commercial zones have any buffer. And I obviously agree on the legal inspection on transfers.
Right, I just think we need to individually,
Yeah.
submit some information so that he knows
Just drop
what
it,
we
drop it.
expect from him the next time this comes up, instead of we're just, continuing down the road we are right here, so.
Well, thank you for the additional clarity on that. We'll take another run at a work session. I think maybe from where I'm sitting as a staff trying to navigate these conversations with council is, there was a little bit of the policy conversation, right? What are we trying to achieve here? Do we have too many? Do we have too little? Do we have just right? We're trying to, reduce over time, and the conflict between livability, supporting tourism to a certain extent, respecting private property rights to earn an income off of their property, what we saw in the survey, and then the affordability question too. They're all kind of intersecting, and we're kind of doing the messy work now of getting down into the nitty gritty regulations that sort of address that. Is it owner occupied only to be able to facilitate the income? Do we put a moratorium recognizing that, yeah, some is okay, but it impacts livability, so we need to have proper buffers and a cap on how many we have. And then we need to give you more data and run the financial analysis and stuff on what each of these things do in terms of transit and lodging taxes and how we support tourism that way, and policing services in town by reducing. What is the legal concerns about transferability? So we have more work to do and more stuff to bring back to you, but I think there's more conversation to be had in sort of a work session, open forum to bring these ideas to the fore.
Well, there was, I'll bring it up for council. She mentioned, do we want to look at some kind of a short-term moratorium while we have this discussion to try to keep folks from grabbing up something in that 250 buffer zone? Yeah, I don't know. It's not a big difference between the 250 and the 5, not as much as I thought it was going to be, which is good. But while we have this discussion and this going on, does it make some sense to just kind of say we're not going to issue any more STR permits until we know, within the residential area in particular, until we know what's going on? Again, I think that the downtown commercial is a different discussion, and I think I'm speaking. I think I heard that there was pretty much more than one individual who felt that way. I can't say consensus because we're not doing that, but
I agree with having a moratorium as Gary described.
just while we're doing this discussion so that we can have this discussion and make thoughtful decisions without being pushed.
Before I would approve of a moratorium, I think we need to
Only on
know
new, yeah.
what's the likely, how many requests do we normally get in a month? By the number of people that showed up tonight, I wouldn't say that there's a
Yep.
whole bunch of demand out there that's gonna go, oh, there might change it, so we better rush and do this. But
So we get, what, 3 to 5 per year? We have like 3 or 5 last year, I think. And
so
we'd have
I
to
don't-
clarify, moratorium would be for new, not renew.
New,
right?
yes,
Not
correct.
renewals.
Yes.
Or not like the one this young lady was
Well, I
talking.
mean, we're really kind of we need to think about that particular issue, but
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, then I don't want to make decisions in this time of the meeting because that's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be very careful with it
Okay.
right.
while perhaps assuaging some fear.
Right. Well, I mean, getting some input of whether that it goes into the next report for a work session or not is
Right.
it sounds like there's enough interest in exploring that topic.
So direct all our comments to Matt for now. Matt? Okay. We don't need to CC you or anything or Jordan or, okay. You want more emails?
Did you hear that? Jordan said CC him.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sure,
I'd like to
got it.
put in my 2 cents. That's it. That's all I want. That's all I can say about that. Okay. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, Mayor, you had one more that you wanted to do, letter of support for the dark skies.
Yeah, is there anybody against that? I
No.
mean, letter of support for getting
No,
the
but-
certificate. That was kind of the whole point of doing
Right.
the,
No brainer.
You have to get it started. Evidently,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
necessary so that we, down the road, if we really want to do it, we got to get it started. So
Yeah.
let's get it started.
Okay,
there you go.
there we go.
I mean, I don't think.
Start?
anybody-
Do you mean
Thanks for
start?
bringing it up.
Good.
Yeah,
Start it.
there you go. Okay. Who wants to go? You want to go first?
No.
Gary?
You know, I pretty much, my report was, what we just had, I was pleased with the tone and the tenure of 99% of the meeting we had over at the building.
Oh, good.
There were a couple of folks that bent my ear a little bit. I had a excellent, and they were very complimentary to both you, Jordan, and to Carrie after the meeting, about thinking like they've got an ear here, there's work going on, they feel like they're making progress, especially from some of the key movers and shakers, as opposed to some of the folks who just were unhappy that we didn't approve the building on Barclay. So, you know, and I took a little hit on that, but that's okay. That's part of the deal. I had on my armored underwear, so I'm okay.
Wow. Anybody?
I'm done.
Okay. I had a couple of EDCO meetings in the last 2 weeks. One was an EDCO board meeting. They had speakers from Pacific Power there, not our electric provider. However, they use the vast majority of the power that they bring into this region that they serve, which is a lot of Deschutes County and Jefferson Crook County. Comes on BPA transmission lines, which, you know, are served by Central Electric, who is our utility. So they piggyback a lot on that. So, you know, from a general interest, they overlap a lot on that. I feel like the industry really really talks a little bit out of two sides of their mouths, because they'll say, oh, you know, we got plenty of power for everybody. However, they did point out that for a fun fact, there's one of the data centers in Crook County, just one of them, I think one of the larger ones, is the equivalent electricity use of all of Pacific Power's clients in Deschutes County.
I wouldn't doubt it.
One building. And that is going to get worse because between AI and Bitcoin type crypto, yeah, those are incredibly energy intensive applications for data centers and things like that. So that's going to get way worse. But they'll say, no, but we're good, we got enough power. But they are working on 2 different brand new transmission lines, one in Eastern Oregon and one hopefully coming up from, I think, California into Central Oregon over the next few years. But, you know, just in the usual stories of everything's expensive. They had to stop getting stuff from China for security reasons.
Oh, dear.
I know, well, and security reasons, right? You know, things that have computer chips and transformers and stuff. So obviously all the domestic producers are now, you know,
Those that remain.
yeah, over tasked, and obviously, you know, probably twice the cost. So everything's taking twice as long, you know, so kind of growing the energy infrastructure is slow and expensive. Hence, I think, you know, they had a massive rate hike that got approved this year by the PUC. So, but that was really interesting to hear them talking about that. They're kind of, you know, I asked them about wildfire and what they're kind of doing in regards to that. I mean, they were saying, you know, their initial response was, well, a lot of our transmission lines, you know, major transmission lines aren't in forested areas. So I was like, well, that's not the first answer I wanted to hear from you. You know, it's a little bit like, oh, you don't have to worry about that. But they, you know, they said that they are obviously updating and adjusting, you know, reclosures and, you know, the equipment they add to lines now that can, you know, shut down a power line if there's any disturbances on it. CEC does the same thing. I think CEC's been very aggressive about installing those in our area, which is great. So that's just kind of a regional look at that. And then we had a Sisters Community Economic Development meeting with Eric and a couple members. It was on a super icy day, so not a lot of a lot of attendance. I phoned in. Didn't want to slide across town, but kind of finalizing the goals for, standing up that group again. And I think we and Eric are pretty close to kind of getting those goals in place. Usually I think those will be in place for about 3 or 4 years. So progress getting made on that, and but a lot of interest in, being an asset to economic development in Sisters Country, not only for traded sector, but, for peripheral businesses as well. So in regards to our goal setting meeting, community meeting on Monday, I thought that went really well, and I thought good attendance. And some of the, I know Susan and I were at the same table, so I'm sure we might have different things to report on. I would say that one interesting thing was we had a few people come and sit at our table that were of, parent age with younger kids especially, and which was great because that demographic is busy. We're busy and we don't get to show up to these things a lot and hear their side of the story. So I was really appreciative for their time. And it was funny, it was 2 different parents at 2 different times, so they didn't even hear each other's comments, but they were extremely similar in the respect that there's very limited opportunities for kids, especially in the 8 to 10 months of winter we have here, to do anything indoor activities, and obviously recognizing
We had the
that's
same thing at our table.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And obviously recognizing that's not necessarily a city responsibility. That could be a commercial enterprise of some sort or something. SPRD, but we're a unique community, we are the P in SPRD. And, we have a new parks plan. Some opportunity there maybe to lean in on that issue, but that was kind of the unique thing that jumped out, because we normally don't hear that and hear from that demographic very much, because they're home changing diapers and putting kids to bed and all that. So.
Well, there was some discussion about a need to think if we can do away with some of our, especially our advisory committees and other things, to provide some, not necessarily childcare, but some opportunity for folks to participate, to have young children, to have a location in a building, or where young kids, and you understand this too, where young kids can be minimally supervised or whatever, or engaged while their parent is in the meeting providing input, that we might get more of our younger population involved in some of our committees and activities, if we could show them how we could, and I've heard this from you too, how we could provide some level of childcare. So, and they were not just talking us, they were talking about other things within the community.
I love those ideas. I think, especially with like events the other night, that we could especially, carve out that. I mean, if you start adding up every single council meeting or board of commission meeting, we'll have to have a budgetary conversation, but you also have to have available childcare workers too that would be willing to do that. I don't think we would go out and hire childcare
No, we could just,
professional, but
we could activate age-friendly sisters,
there you go.
get volunteers. I mean,
But
We
I
could
think,
put them to work. We could.
Yeah.
so I think that the concept was, especially for some of those kind of meetings like we had the other night, where you're asking people to come in.
right.
Yeah, the other night we had Scott out in the lobby with cookies. I think that was enough.
And given that it is development, it could be child development as well. We could just add that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give them a
So-
big playpen and turn them loose.
That's all I had.
Okay, Susan?
So the only thing I want to share, and it's just kind of humorous. I was at an event the other night at a private home, and their electricity came off the next day. And she called me up and said, well, they opened up the panel and they pulled out the panel and they found that we electrocuted a mouse. And that's why their electricity went off. So
He gave his life.
he gave his life,
Looking
I
to
know,
keep
just to be
warm.
warm. I know. I just thought that was.
He was really warm there for a
Yeah.
second.
Worked really well for a moment.
Okay,
I don't have anything to add.
yeah. I'm going to talk about town halls. Obviously we had one Monday night. I thought it was great. I loved, the informalness of it and just having conversations and community conversations. And I'd like to submit that I'd like to do that 3 times a year, because 2 times a year is not enough and 4 is too many. So I came, sitting here right now, I think 3 town halls a year would be good. It doesn't have to be all 5 of us. I think, as mayor, I don't mind being at all 3 of them, and then maybe one other person just to share the responsibility and, you know, at least having 2 conversations. And maybe there's opportunity to narrow the scope and just have a couple of really good topics to kind of focus in on. I don't know if anybody likes that. That's just my idea on it.
Maybe at a different location.
Different
one of these.
locations,
Well,
yeah.
The 3 numbers are actually not a bad thing to come up with, because you think about the summer season, it's really hard for people in the middle of the summer to kind of get together. They got a lot of other things going on, so that kind of speaks to that number 3.
Yeah, at least it takes one season out when everybody's really busy. I just think that, and I got a lot of feedback from people. They liked it. The people that were here really enjoyed it. There were people that I would say were not my best ally and, have had words with me that came, and after they talked to me a while, they said, hey, thanks a lot. And one of them even said the mayor should get paid. That was not me that put that up there. Someone else put that. But I appreciate the
The
honesty.
mayor shouldn't get paid, so that.
Maybe that's what it said. I don't know.
Well, Mayor, all right, I think I agree with you, but I think that we all should be able to go to those.
Well, anybody can go. I'm not saying, I was just thinking just to not make
Yeah.
everybody's load heavy. It doesn't have to be all 5 of us.
Right.
Anybody who wants to show up can show up. We just got to be careful when we're talking in groups to, maintain, that stuff. And the other thing about a town hall is there's gonna be another town hall right here in this room on the 31st. You might have seen the ad on page 10 in the Nugget. Representative, Emerson Levy wanted to do a town hall with me. So I said, yeah, I'll get city council chambers and we're gonna do a 1-hour town hall, 4 PM on the 31st, which is Wednesday next week. And we don't even have a whole, it's gonna be very generic again. It's gonna be an elected representative and the mayor of Sisters, just to have, anybody can come in and bring up whatever they want to bring up. So I'm looking forward to that. I've never done that before, but having a couple elected officials from different levels is kind of interesting, and I'll let you know how it goes. Obviously, you guys are welcome to show up too.
But again, I think we need to be careful about the number 3.
What's that?
Well, it's a great idea, but if, I don't think we can have more than 2 counselors there.
You can if you're not
You can.
making,
Okay.
you're not
All right.
making a decision,
Thank you.
so you can be.
Yeah.
You just don't talk about decision.
Yeah, we
making.
don't talk
Yeah,
about,
especially stuff that's,
we don't talk shop.
Before council.
yeah, especially stuff that's coming up, right? I mean, obviously, we wouldn't talk about.
Lead to deliberations on a decision.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be quite informal, hopefully, and I don't know who's gonna show up, to be honest with you, maybe.
What time
nobody.
was that again?
4 PM.
It's in the paper, yeah.
Yeah, it's in the paper,
Didn't see it.
page 10, there's a little tiny ad. And she put it out. I mean,
Yeah.
this is really more her thing. I'm just kind of being a host and gonna be there with her and see what happens. I
Are there
don't know.
topics or it's just an open?
She hasn't published any topics. I've asked about that,
Okay.
so maybe she'll come up with something. I
That's
don't-
nice. I'm glad the city's allowing that here. That's great.
Well, I asked and they said it was all right, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey.
Good, obviously there was a hole in the calendar, so that helped, right? So we got the time we wanted. I don't have anything else other than just to thank staff again for storm stuff and shelter stuff. We're doing what we're doing, right? Good job, everybody.
Small staff and a lot of work getting done.
Mighty.
17 FTEs, right?
16. Oh, this might be 70. Yeah, Rebecca. Is that 17?
See, I keep track. You're
This, you don't even have to name this.
We swing hard for 17, let me tell you. Thank you, everybody.
Do we have checks today?
Nope.